Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Iron Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Awaken Replica Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. When she was 4, Shirou had made it clear that she was different from most kids. There were those who would feel a mix of excitement and nervousness about getting a quirk diagnosis. Excited, as they would soon discover the full extent of their unique talent, and nervous, for the slim chance that they would turn out to be quirkless, abnormal. Not that the girl understood this concept at her young age. But that's what made her different. Even though the idea of having a quirk excited her, she wasn't as invested as any of the other kids seemed to be. Her interests lay in wanting to learn how to cook, especially after tasting her mother's meals many times since she could properly chew food. However, she did love heroes. What kid didn't? In today's society, mentioning a hero of Japan was just part of everyday life. Whether it's the fiery heat of endeavor, or the legendary symbol of peace, All Might, it was impossible not to admire them. Heroes were more than just protectors, they were the heart of the nation's spirit. But once again, Shirou remained an outsider. Among everyone mentioned or seen in hero work, it was an unofficial hero that caught Shirou's interest. No one, not even her own parents, understood what attracted the girl to the vigilante, but she was always ready to hear about the man on the news, the one known to be an assassin. But even more than that, if you could believe it, she was fascinated with the structure of objects, especially the craftsmanship of swords. From their length and the history of their use to the battles they fought in, she studied everything she could about a variety of blades. If you asked either parent at the time, neither her mother nor father could ever explain where this fixation came from. Her father even joked that it was like it was embedded into her very DNA, as if the obsession were a quirk of its own. Perhaps that's why Shirou felt comfortable at her current status, even for a kid surrounded by a world of heroes. So when Shirou was suddenly seen with a rather large katana in her hand while at school, her parents knew her quirk had manifested. She got an immediate quirk diagnosis. From what we could gather, it seems your daughter can create replicas of objects she has seen, the doctor explained. That caught Shirou's attention. She wasn't exactly one of the loudest kids. Even if she would laugh or become thrilled, she always had what some would consider a surprisingly proper demeanor for her age, but even she was shaking with the excitement of a child on Christmas morning. "If I may, what exactly do you mean, doctor?" Shirou heard her mom ask. The doctor raised a hand as he slowly got up from his chair. Shirou watched as the practitioner reached for a red dry erase marker and headed to a nearby whiteboard. Whatever was on the board was wiped away with the eraser he grasped in his other hand. The man popped the cap off, before he started drawing some simple, easily comprehensible pictures. She looked at her mom, still a little confused at what the doctor was demonstrating. The woman could only give her daughter a shrug, as she knew about as much as she knew. Keep in mind that this is only a surface-level explanation. Since your daughter's quirk is still developing, there could be differences or even discrepancies. Regardless, here is what is apparent. The doctor took a ruler and pointed it at the board, following the guide he drew. When your daughter analyzes an object, it's not just about recognizing it. The neurons in her brain send special signals that both her memory and quirk respond to, gathering hundreds of pieces of information. This includes not only its basic structure but also the history behind it. Presumably, that's just the first step. Her quirk mainly manifests in the palms of her hands, and when recalling that information, she reconstructs the object as best as she can understand it. Halfway through the explanation, although still paying attention, Shirou looked down at her hands. What she was being told did make sense to her. She had felt weird sensations in both her head and hands for some time, but brushed them off, as they did not cause her much physical harm. At worst, perhaps an occasional headache. This feeling that Shirou was experiencing, it wasn't a happiness she'd ever felt before in her life. Unbelievable! Shirou heard her dad say. This is great. She felt her mom grab her into a loving hug, her dad soon joining in. Shirou, honey, this is amazing. This will bring you so many opportunities, anything you want to do. All that studying you've been doing has paid off. You were probably a whole step ahead of us." Her dad laughed. She chuckled. "I'm not that smart." Their embrace stopped as she saw her mom looking deep into her eyes. "Shirou, me and your father will do everything we can to help you. Whatever dream you have, with your quirk, everything." She could feel her heart exploding with an intense joy, a wide smile spreading across her lips. Yeah. It was at age 9 that Shirou lost her parents. Her memory of the event was both so vague and somehow so vivid at the same time. Her father had just gotten off work early and came home as a surprise to spend the day with her and her mother. They did what they would do at least twice a month, a big trip to the museum in Fuyuki City to inspect any new artifacts they had obtained. For Shirou, it was like being in a winter wonderland. Being able to learn the history of weaponry from some of the greatest known histories of old was fantastic. So much to learn about their craftsmanship, the usage throughout many battles. It was a delight. One of the greatest memories to be had. Or at least, that's what she thought. It happened so fast. The blaze erupted suddenly, casting flickering shadows over the chaos. Or perhaps only from her perspective, where time seemed to slow down just enough to register the fiery outbreak and people's terrified screams. She only caught a brief glimpse of the flames raining from the sky before she felt the overwhelming weight of her parents' bodies collapsing over her, attempting to ward off the approaching disaster. No final words. They were there, fiercely protective, and then they were gone. No longer than a second. Even with their protection, pain seared through her body as she was flung a distance away, finding herself trapped beneath twisted metal and scattered rubble, every movement hindered by the jagged wreckage sealing her in. Shirou wasn't sure what was running through her mind at that moment. All of her thoughts and feelings weren't just out of sync, they were dulled by shock and exhaustion. She knew she was scared, her heart pounding in her chest, and she was searing with pain from the burns across her body. She knew she wanted to cry, tears welling up but refusing to fall. But everything just stopped, as if her mind froze. She looked up at the polluted sky, thick with dark smoke billowing from the blazing fire in Fuyuki, the acrid smell filling the air around her. There was only one thought at the forefront. Was this where she was going to die? As if someone had answered her own swirling thoughts, she suddenly felt her body lighten as the overwhelming mess was gradually but resolutely swept away. She tried her best to concentrate, but her eyes felt like they were burning and blurred. In her semi-conscious state, she could barely make out the figure of an older man with jet black hair, tousled and unkempt, dressed in a tattered black suit and a long, worn trench coat that looked quite the mess. If Shirou didn't know any better, he might have considered him a villain. That was until her vision adjusted and stabilized, he was able to see more clearly. It wasn't just an older man. It was the vigilante everyone had been talking about recently, the vigilante hero that Shirou admired so much, named Alter, or more commonly known as the villain killer. Similar to the well-known hero killer, Stain, Alter has been reported for killing many villains who threaten the natural order and peace of society. Well, they say villains, but some weren't even officially classified as villains. From corrupt politicians to members of an underground mafia that not even police or seasoned pro heroes could catch, he was a true assassin. It has been debated whether he was a hero or a villain by any standards. But to Shirou, it didn't matter. Somehow, someway, she could tell that the man was trying to do good. It was all confirmed here, as any and all reports she's heard paled in comparison to the thing she noticed most at this very moment, the man's face. It looked exhausted, very exhausted. Like he had been through war and came out completely changed from who he once was. She could sense the loss and pain that never seemed to heal. But could she tell something like that? Was it because of her quirk? Those thoughts quickly faded as she felt the man's arms wrap around her. Small body. I finally found someone who didn't die from my mistake. The man lamented, tears appearing in the corners of his eyes. Shirou's eyes widened as she looked at the man's sorrowful but still alleviating smile. Something clicked in Shirou's mind as her consciousness began to drift and fade. This man was not a villain or hero by society's standards. This man, this seemingly ruthless killer of villains and the corrupt, was one thing and one thing only. He was just a man. Shirou's eyes started to open, and her blurry vision steadily coming back into focus. At first, all she could see was a white-tiled ceiling, even the small black specks or dust particles. Her vision was always unusually sharp, which she assumed was because of her quirk, although she couldn't recall if the doctor had ever clarified that. But that was the least of her worries. Where was she? It was clear she had escaped the fire, but where was that man? She almost instinctively shot upright from her lying position, but her body stopped her, as if to say, "You will hurt yourself. Slow down. You'll snap your stitches." The girl turned her head toward the voice, locking eyes with that same man, the vigilante who sat down in a nearby chair in the hospital room. He looked rather normal compared to when they first met. He was dressed in a formal, tailored gray suit paired with a crisp white shirt and an eye-catching red tie, a sharp contrast to the ragged, worn-out attire he had previously worn. Part of Shirou wondered why the man hadn't been arrested yet, considering he was a vigilante. However, she quickly realized that few people had probably seen the man's face or knew her real name, including Shirou herself. That's when it suddenly clicked for her. She was in a hospital room, so this man really did save her life. Part of her foggy mind initially dismissed it as some kind of dream, but if she's here now, that means it was real. Which also meant that, "Are my parents?" Shirou couldn't finish her sentence before the man nodded in response. Her previously tense body relaxed as she let go of the tension and sank back into her hospital bed. "Is anyone else okay?" "I'm afraid not," the man said. "When I found you, you were the only one still breathing." Shirou glanced back up at the ceiling, appearing to zone out for a moment until her sudden words broke the silence. "Why did you only save me?" Shirou wasn't looking at him, but she sensed the vigilante had paused completely. The silence indicated he was choosing his next words carefully. When the girl finally glanced back, she finally noticed the name tag on the man's shirt. It read, Kiritsugu Emiya. "I've always aspired to be a hero of justice," Kiritsugu confessed. "However, the kind of justice I envisioned serving was incompatible with our society today. At least, not as transparent as my methods are. That's why I've chosen to be the vigilante alter. Despite how the media portrays me and my choices, my objective is to save as many lives as possible by eliminating those who pose the greatest threat. But on that fateful night of the fire, I failed to save over 700 people." Shirou stared intently at the man for a good long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as she framed the man's face, trying to read his emotions. What the man just said about his dream, goal, or whatever you might call it, Shirou could tell it came straight from the depths of his heart. It wasn't a shallow facade, a lie, or an excuse. It resonated with genuine conviction. In a way, it caused Shirou to reflect on her own resolve, in comparison to Kiritsugu. Was there something she could do, something similar to this man's actions? Could she possess the courage, the skill, and the resolve to try and make a meaningful difference to society? Then again, should a 9-year-old even be mulling over such a heavy burden? Although that concern seemed almost irrelevant, because deep within her gut, Shirou could feel an overwhelming sense of guilt, the guilt of all those who weren't saved that day. If she hadn't been pinned down and weakened, perhaps at least one person could have been rescued, lived to see another day. Live to see their families. She could feel the weight of her regret pressing heavily on her mind like a stone sinking into the depths of a dark river. But let's set that aside for now. You've been through a lot, and I can't burden you with that. There is something much more vital I need to ask you, Kiritsugu said. Would you prefer to be put into foster care, or to be taken in by me? Shirou's eyes shifted from the man sitting across from her to her own lap, where a plain white blanket was casually draped. She then leaned back slowly against the bed, crossing her arms over her chest as she stared upwards, lost in deep deliberation. Both options before her appeared plausible and even reasonable. Really, neither choice carried overtly negative consequences. However, amid the swirl of rational considerations, something resonated within Shirou's heart that urged her to her final decision. I want to stay with you. For the first time since meeting the vigilante, Shirou could swear she saw a gleam in his eyes after hearing the girl's response. A small smile appeared as the man gave a sincere, "Great." Shirou gained a small smile of her own. She knew from how her chest felt lighter that she had made the right choice. Even after her decision was made, the process of being adopted by Kiritsugu was not instantaneous. Shirou couldn't recall all the details, but during her visits with Kiritsugu, she would often overhear him mumbling under his breath about how exhausting and complicated the paperwork was, and how arduous the entire adoption process felt. But regardless of that fact, Shirou was still allowed to visit him regularly, as specified in the adoption agreement. The purpose of these visits was to determine whether the girl would be a proper fit for Kiritsugu's home. Surprisingly, Kiritsugu's place of residence was located only a short distance from the adoption center, making visits more doable. The first day Shirou arrived at the humble, surprisingly comfortable-looking abode, she wasn't quite sure what to expect. From what little she could gather from workers at her adoption center, Kiritsugu apparently had a family, something that seemed somewhat surprising given his intense, solitary reputation. Kiritsugu Emiya, also known as the vigilante alter, the villain killer, had a family. The girl found it difficult to imagine the image of a family man with the ruthless assassin she had heard about. But she supposed it did have some sense to it, considering what Kiritsugu had explained to her some time ago. Walking across the smooth pavement and through a meticulously maintained garden filled with iris, lotuses, and neatly trimmed hedges, Shirou was accompanied by Kiritsugu, who walked just behind her. The sunlight was hid away as they stepped closer toward the house. Before them stood a modest yet well-kept gray door, its paint slightly peeling but still sturdy. Typically, Shirou didn't pay much attention to first impressions, but recalling the impact the man had made on her that day in the hospital, she felt it was only polite to make a good impression. After all, that was what her biological parents had always taught her. Next to her, she watched as Kiritsugu pulled a shiny silver key from his left pocket and inserted it into the lock. With a quick turn, she heard the deadbolt shift, and a moment later, Kiritsugu opened the door. In an instant, Shirou caught a whiff of one of the most delicious smells she'd ever experienced, the familiar scent of cookies. It felt nostalgic somehow, reminding her of how her mother used to cook for her. She hadn't had a good meal in quite some time, now that she thought about it. "We're home," Kiritsugu called out. The gentle sound of soft footsteps echoed through the air as Shirou watched a small girl with silver hair approach her with graceful movement. She watched as she looked up at Kiritsugu with striking red eyes that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, and a warm smile spread across her face, indicating a hint of purity. She noticed that the girl was notably small, probably about half her height, with delicate features and a strong presence despite her tiny size. "Papa, welcome back. Mama's in the kitchen fight now," the girl said. Kiritsugu chucked. "I can smell that. Have you been helping her?" "But she's still having a bit of trouble." Shirou watched as the girl then locked eyes with her. She moved closer and looked her over, as if inspecting her. Did she do something wrong already? Or was something about her appearance simply seen as odd? The small girl herself was dressed quite fancy. She wore a collared, purple long-sleeved shirt with a light purple scarf to match, a short white skirt, and purple boots. Not that it was a big fashion breakthrough, but the way the clothes were so intricately sewn made her look quite elegant. At least, compared to her rather plain clothes. "Papa, is this who I think it is?" the girl asked. Kiritsugu gave her a pat on the head. "Correct. This is Shirou, the one I've been talking to you about. She'll be having periodic visits with us until we finalize her adoption. And Shirou, this is Ilya, my daughter." "Oh, Wani-chan." Ilya took her hands in her own, drawing her full attention to her. "Papa told me so much about you. I'm so excited to have you as part of our family." Shirou pet her head in confusion. "Wani-chan?" "Yeah," Ilya exclaimed with excitement. "You're going to be my sister sooner or later. So, I'll call you Wani-chan." Shirou's brow furrowed in confusion, but before she could even speak, she found herself being hurried down the corridor by her soon-to-be sister, her hand firmly gripped around her as she pulled her along the hallway. Her grip was honestly firmer than she would have ever expected, considering she must have been younger than she was. Right? That thought was immediately tossed to the wayside as they entered what looked to be the kitchen. The alluring aroma of cookies lingered even stronger than before, as her eyes naturally drifted towards their origin. In the center of the kitchen, in front of the oven, she saw a tall, beautiful woman with the same silver-colored hair she had just seen a second earlier, as well as the same crimson eyes. "One-ichan," Emiya chirped. "This is Mama. She's great. You'll love her." The woman glanced over at her, her eyes meeting her with a warm smile that she swore could have melted the entire Antarctic. "Oh, Kiri! Is this the girl I've been hearing so much about?" Kiritsugu appeared in Shirou's view from her left. "That's right." The woman gave her a simple bow. "I am Irisveal, but you're allowed to call me your mother," she said, touching her cheek with a finger. "Or would you prefer Iris?" "Hello, I am Shirou," she replied, returning the gesture. "I don't have a preference. Both are fine." "That's great." Irisveal grinned, clapping her hands. "You came just in time. I am almost done baking the cookies. Kiri will show you around and help you get settled in, then afterward, we can eat." Shirou nodded as she looked at Kiritsugu, who seemed to be leading the way, and motioned for the girl to follow him. The two went through the house, and Shirou got a good look at the interior and the different rooms, including her own. It didn't look like a typical guest bedroom either. It had apparently been specially decorated by Irisveal herself. They must have done a thorough look through her background, considering she noticed numerous blade and sword motifs along her wall. There were displays of various kinds of katanas, wallpaper featuring simple sword drawings, and even her bed and covers depicted some artwork of King Arthur with her mighty Excalibur. She didn't dislike it at all, however. It gave her a glimpse of what kind of mother Irisveal was. "I like it," she said. "I'd like some hero posters too, if that's okay." She watched as Kiritsugu's lips curled into a small, gentle smile. "Of course. It's yours, after all." And of course, Emiya was always eager to give her soon-to-be sister a tour of her room as well. It looked very nice, with lavender stripes painted horizontally along the soft, cream-colored walls, creating a calm and cozy atmosphere. The ceiling was decorated with intricately cut paper snowflakes, each uniquely crafted. A wintry feel was how Shirou would describe it. She could tell which ones were made by Irisveal and Emiya, some flakes rough around the edges, but that didn't detract from the room's overall design. She also had shelves filled with an assortment of dolls carefully arranged along the wooden ledges. Some were cuddly plush toys you'd find at your local toy store, while others appeared to be handcrafted. Some time had passed, and all the fun and exploring were passing by faster than expected. Irisveal had called the three of them out of their wandering around their modest home to sit at the kitchen table. Each of the 4 seats had plates of cookies for them, as well as a bowl of another dish Irisveal had prepared, tempura soba. She watched as the other 3 put their hands together and closed their eyes, and she quickly followed suit. "Thank you for this meal," they said in unison. Shirou lifted a piece of golden tempura, its crispy batter gently crackling as it met her chopsticks. The rich aroma of soy and dashi wafted up from the steaming broth, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. As she took a bite, the shrimp's sweetness combined with the savory soup, the crunch giving way to tender meat. She then slurped the soba noodles, the smooth strands gliding effortlessly, carrying the broth's deep, comforting flavor with every mouthful. Wow, it was just incredible. There was something about the texture and taste that reminded her of her mom's cooking. Irisveal had truly outdone herself. But then she paused, carefully placing her chopsticks in the bowl. Her hands clutched her shorts, and her gaze dropped to the floor, a slight but noticeable frown on her face. It only just dawned on her in that moment how much she missed this with her parents. How they encouraged her to follow her dreams, even when she didn't know what she wanted to be yet. How her mom carefully taught her what she needed to know about the culinary arts and picked her up from every scorched meal. How her dad used to bring her home pictures of various blades he thought would interest her. Shirou looked around the table where Irisveal, Kiritsugu, and Emiya enjoyed the same meal she had. Her initial frown softened into a smile. She hoped this could indeed be a fresh start for her. She couldn't quite explain the feeling the Emiya family gave off, but it made her long to be officially part of this family, wishing she could join them fully at that moment. It all seemed so nice. "One-chan." Emiya's voice snapped her out of it. "Are you okay, Shirou?" Irisveal asked. "It's not bad, is it?" The girl immediately shook her head. It's great. I was just thinking, she scratched the back of her head before smiling, if I could help you cook. Her eyes nearly shut from the shining intensity of Irisveel's grin, a smile so radiant it could rival the very sun. I would love that. Is that something you love to do, Shirou? Irisveel asked. She nodded. My mom always cooked for us and I asked her to teach me. I've been learning since then. I'm not great, but... She didn't realize Irisveel had left her seat until she suddenly felt her arms wrap completely around her from behind, her embrace firm yet gentle. Her hug was warm and incredibly comforting, and delicate to the touch. It was so warm and soothing that it took all her willpower not to fall asleep, as if her embrace momentarily took her to a place of safety. Away from any fears she might have had. Away from the memory of that fire. Soon, Emiya joined the embrace, along with Kiritsugu. The girl smiled. Even though it was a change she didn't ask for, she didn't hate it. She loved it with all her heart. It was at age 12 that Shirou decided she wanted to be a hero. More specifically, be just like her father, Kiritsugu, a hero of justice. It had been almost 3 years since she was officially adopted into the Emiya household. Shirou Emiya did have a nice ring to it. And her time there was nothing but splendid. When she wasn't studying different blades or objects to improve her use of her quirk, she would be cooking alongside her mother, creating many freshly cooked meals every morning without fail for the family, or walking around the city with her older sister. And Kiritsugu? Before, the old man would tell her stories of his many jobs as a vigilante. To Shirou's surprise, he had taken some lighter jobs that never resulted in lethal outcomes for his targets. Some involved just apprehension or handing them over to authorities or other groups that might have been connected to the individual. The latter option seemed contradictory, especially if it was a villain group, but perhaps it was Kiritsugu's way of catching the bigger fish rather than just the small fry. But now, they would be training in hand-to-hand combat, as well as in the use of weaponry, swords, of course, but also the use of long-range weapons like a gun. Was it really appropriate for a 12-year-old to handle a pistol at that age? Well, Shirou didn't question the morality of it, and neither should anyone else. On the hand-to-hand front, Kiritsugu taught her the ways of jujitsu. From quick and powerful strikes, to sweeping kicks, to grappling someone and forcing them to the ground, the old man aimed to teach her techniques that could injure her opponent. But Shirou could tell he was holding back on teaching more lethal applications, given her age and eventual profession. Not that Shirou wanted to do such a thing anyway. Regarding her weaponry, mainly swords, Kiritsugu chose to teach her kendo. Although the man was not a swordsman by any means, he had some experience wielding a blade in an attempt to find what best suited her fighting style for her line of work. Progress was admittedly slower on this front, as Kiritsugu's lack of knowledge led Shirou to improvise, effectively developing her own fighting style. But her father assured her that eventually she'd get it down to a rhythm. A green energy surrounded Shirou's hands, a blade appearing in each. Standing opposite her was Kiritsugu, who prepared a staff designed to counter such weapons. It didn't take long for the two to engage, Shirou dodging and weaving around the staff's spins and trying to counter with her two swords. Oh. Ah! Shirou yelped as she tumbled onto the floor of their house's gym, dropping her twin blades to the side. You lost focus again. Better than before, but there's still room for improvement, Kiritsugu said, putting down his own weapon. Shirou rubbed the side of her head. What did you train in, the army? Not at all, although that does sound torturous. This is all because of my own personal regiments. I've spent years training, when you've only scratched the surface. Should have expected as much. But I am a little frustrated. The world still isn't appearing. Take your time with it. Do not strain yourself. Yeah, I know, old man. Kiritsugu chuckled softly before Shirou noticed his eyes drifting down to the blades she had been using in their spar. He approached the girl's pair of swords, looking over their design and structure. One was black with red lines forming hexagons along the entire blade surface, the other was entirely white with no additional details. Between the bases and the hilts of both blades was the symbol of yin and yang, the concepts that represent that of opposites, but at the same time are also complementary. The pair of blades created by Ganjiang, named Kansho and Bakuya, Kiritsugu said. Shirou tilted her head. You know of these? Only by name and their creator. It was a bit of history I learned some time ago, but most of it has been lost to another part of my mind. I wonder, why do you choose these blades specifically? I know you have many others to choose from. That question caused Shirou to pause and deeply consider. It was a valid question. Why did she favor using the twin blades so much? She pondered intensively, trying to look at every possible reason, but her mind kept returning empty, no clear answer at present. I suppose, it's just instinct, I guess, she finally answered. I have no real reason. It just feels fitting to me, that's all. She couldn't read her father's face clearly. While his expression appeared to convey satisfaction, there was a subtle hint of curiosity in the way his eyebrows subtly furrowed and then raised. After a few minutes of silence, her old man sat down on the floor. Alongside her, Shirou, promise me one thing, Kiritsugu began. Be a real hero. A true hero of justice. I will always admit that my ways of vigilantism are questionable at best, and a bloody trail at worst. There will come a day where you may need to dirty your hands. But you'll never get your hands as dirty as mine. Do you understand? Shirou's mind went blank for a moment. It was true, she wanted to be like Kiritsugu. She wanted to save as many lives as possible, even if it meant making a terrible choice like taking a life. But she promised herself and her father that she would do everything she could to avoid taking such drastic actions. The girl stood up and reached out her hand, looking slightly down at her old man. I promise. Shirou Emiya is someone who will aim to save as many lives as possible, not take them recklessly, she said. The corners of Kiritsugu's lips curled into a smile as he took his daughter's hand. Yes, the future definitely looked brighter now. Maybe the vigilante known as alter won't be needed in their society's future anymore. Standing up, Kiritsugu looked even more determined. Now, Shirou. That world within yourself you've mentioned. Let's see if you can bring a piece of it to life. At age 15, after years of preparation, countless hours, days, and weeks of honing her skills, but most importantly, with the support of her new family behind her, Shirou Emiya would finally be doing it. She was about to take the entrance exam for UA, one of Japan's most prestigious hero schools. As she looked toward the front door of her home, ready to leave for what she knew would be her chance to make a difference, she felt a pit form in her stomach. What if, even after everything, she failed? She might not make it into UA, become a hero of justice, and save people. What if she can't do the very thing she promised the victims of that fire she said she would? Shirou. Shirou looked behind herself. She saw her father, mother, and sister behind her, their smiles shining like treasure. Ilya approached her and took her hand with both of hers. Then, she started gently caressing her hand, sending a wave of comfort through Shirou's body. You don't have to worry. Because I know you will do well. A big sister is supposed to comfort her younger sister, right? So I promise to be your strength, she said, her smile never faltering. Ilya. She's right, Irisville added. We will be here to support you, no matter the outcome. Mom. One pair of footsteps softly echoed through the house as Kiritsugu approached Shirou. Briefly looking down at the girl, he took his hand and gently placed it on her head, then started to ruffle her hair. He smiled. You can do it. Shirou, her eyes locked with her father's, could only let out one single word. Yeah. Hey, Kaken. A small blonde boy looked back, watching a similarly small girl with green hair and freckles follow close behind him through the woods. When we grow up, let's be heroes. Together, she said. The boy sneered, a self-satisfied smile on his face. Sure, Izumi, but no getting in my way. Izumi grew up learning two key truths about the world. First, that people are not born equal. In a society where quirks, these extraordinary powers that are often used by heroes to protect civilians and maintain peace, such abilities are typically seen as markers of superiority by most. As a result, individuals born without quirks, known as the quirkless, are often viewed as abnormal or inferior by societal standards, leading to social stigmatization and discrimination. But that wasn't limited to just those without power. This leads to the second point, that people are not treated equally. It doesn't matter if you have a quirk or not. Those who see you as worthless or unappealing will treat you like trash meant to be discarded. This idea may seem absurd at first. Plenty of people are praised for their innate abilities. But you have to see it to believe it. That's exactly what Izumi Midoriya experienced when she first discovered her quirk. This inequality manifests in many ways, but social acceptance and bullying were the main issues for her. But she could take it. She had to. It began when she was around 4 years old. A couple months had passed since Kaken's birthday. His quirk appeared a few days afterwards, and he's been showing it off like always since then, constantly bragging day in, day out. His quirk, which he called Explosion, lets him produce a nitroglycerin-like sweat from his palms and ignite it at will to generate explosions of various sizes. Even as a kid, she was a bit tired of his boasting. He would talk about how amazing he was compared to others who had weaker quirks. She admired Kaken's confidence and enthusiasm, but how he treated others raised some alarms in her that she couldn't fully understand at her age back then. But regardless, she couldn't deny how incredible such a quirk was. Izumi grabbed a pencil and began writing something down. "Writing in your notebook again, Izumi?" Kaken asked, looking over at her from across the table. She looked at him, an innocent smile on her face. "Of course. Your quirk is just so cool, Kaken." Kaken let out a laugh, one she'd become familiar with. "That's one of the few things you're right about." Izumi was seen as a bit of an oddball by some of her classmates in Aldra. In hindsight, it might have been because she studied more than most in her class, but also her admiration for heroes like All Might was much stronger than her peers, only rivaled by Kaken. While the other kids only cared about their quirk and how it could help them become heroes in the future, assuming they even got into a hero school, Izumi was more interested in understanding how quirks worked and how they could be developed. At that time, she wasn't as analytical as she would become about 10 years later, but her interest was still there. Over time, she paid closer attention to everyone's quirks. From their appearance and how they looked, to their main strengths and weaknesses, she was always analyzing and writing notes in childish handwriting on a piece of paper. She loved quirks. She could only wonder what her own quirk might turn out to be. That day finally arrived, just a few days after her birthday. She was sitting in class, listening to the teacher and doing her work, the usual routine. At one point, her eyes sort of drifted. She didn't know why she was looking at Kaken. It felt almost instinctual, like her eyes were drawn to something. The boy was using little spurts of his quirk here or there. The teacher already had to tell him off for about the 5th time. Perhaps that's what it was? But her eyes were especially focused on how he was activating it. Just a few quick sparks from his clenched hand. After analyzing his posture, she moved her right hand steadily, imitating his hand's position. She stared at it longingly, almost imagining herself recreating those same sparks. And then she did. In the palm of her hand, small but brighter sparks than Kaken's appeared, loud and crackling. Her eyes widened in shock, but she soon realized that her classmates' reactions surpassed her own, staring in complete silence with gaping mouths and astonished eyes. Especially Kaken. After that, Izumi's mother was immediately contacted and she took her daughter for a quirk diagnosis. After running some tests, "We must say, this is quite unlike anything we've seen before," the doctor said. Izumi was resisting every urge to jump out of her seat, the girl's smile radiating like a ray of sunshine, which was the perfect way to describe the young lady. "What do you mean? Does that mean it's dangerous?" Inko worried, holding Izumi close to her. The doctor let out a hearty chuckle, waving his hand. "Nonsense. Don't jump to conclusions, Mrs. Midoriya. To clarify, what I mean is, the way her quirk functions is very different compared to other instances of the same type of quirk." Inko's eyebrow furrowed. "I'm afraid I'm not following." "I'll try to phrase this as clearly as I can," he began. "On the surface, it seems she has the ability to copy the quirks of others. We've had a similar case just a few months ago, actually. But that young boy was only able to copy a person's quirk by touching said person. With your Izumi, it is different. Her teachers have stated to have observed her staring at students, specifically at their quirks. That's because she's not just seeing the quirk, she's gaining information. Deeper levels of understanding that no one usually could attain, especially just through one glance. That information, the history of the quirk, its functionality, all of it flows through her brain, which in turn allows her body to adapt and replicate the quirk's factor. I see, Inko said. So, my Izumi will be able to use a variety of quirks? Yes, the doctor finished for her. Now we don't know if there's a perceived limit, as was the case with the boy from months ago. But regardless, make sure she's extra careful. It's clear that aspects of her quirk have already affected her behavior, so she might have already analyzed and stored other quirks besides the, one used by the young Katsuki Bakugo, was it? Inko nodded, while Izumi still felt like she was on the moon. She had a quirk. A really good quirk. A quirk that would be able to help others. Not to mention the potential versatility. Everything felt like it was lining up. Finally, she could be on equal footing with Kaken and everyone else. Everything was going to be perfect. Still trying to use my DMN quirk? Give it a rest already. I understand, Kaken. Stop writing in your pathetic notebook already. Got it, Kaken. Why do you keep trying? You're just a talentless copycat, Izumi. Sure, Kaken. The next 10 years had some of the highest highs and lowest lows for Izumi. The highs? Her quirk wasn't just good for replicating other people's quirks, it gave her this natural instinct of analysis, something she was already good at before her quirk manifested. Anything her teachers threw at her, from math to science to even a different language or two, Izumi took it all on. She wasn't perfect by any means, she would get questions on tests wrong, or mess up an English word, but she was absolutely one of the best students in Aldra. Speaking of her quirk, she'd been analyzing not just her classmates' quirks, but many heroes over the years as well. Kamui Woods, Edge Shot, Best Jeanist, so many great heroes. When she had any spare time, she'd train these quirks she had gained to make sure she made use of them to the best of their abilities. Unfortunately, she hadn't been able to see a fight of all mights in person, but maybe one day. She wanted to one day fight alongside the symbol of peace. The lows, however, were more severe than she had expected. Ever since the day she first used her quirk, she was expecting Kaken to be excited about how they could be on equal footing, train together as they work towards a future where they can stand side by side as amazing heroes. But that dream Izumi held on to soon died right afterward. He would belittle her, insult her and her quirk. You have to steal from others to even be half as good, is what she would hear many a time. She did her best to ignore it, still treat him as kind as she would with any other person, but it only got worse. He'd grab her stuff and explode it with his quirk, whether to show off how much better he was, or just to make her feel a sense of loss, she wasn't sure. But it hurt, even more when she became a target by his other friends. She had heard stories of people who were quirkless being treated like outcasts, like alien life forms from another galaxy that weren't welcomed here. Izumi could only think, is this what those people feel? To be judged so cruelly for something not within your control? To be given such? Get a grip. Still, copying those who are better than you? What a DMN imitator. A harsh treatment? By someone she considered to be her friend, her best friend? This wasn't what she dreamed of when she thought about working to become a hero. Not at all. She wouldn't be lying if she said it wasn't affecting her, eating at her very psyche. But she could endure it. She had to. She was 14 now. Her bad thoughts were pushed aside as she walked into the crowd of civilians, cheering as they watched Kamui Woods performing wonderfully against a giant villain, one that Izumi had never seen before. She was about to analyze their quirk, before an even bigger figure joined the fight, Emilady. Izumi had heard rumors of a new debut of a new hero, a female hero at that. Her eyes were drawn in immediately, albeit trying to avoid the obvious appeal factor of her costume. She took down the villain in one strike, which was impressive enough, but analyzing her further, it seemed her quirk allowed her to grow in size. Those seemed to be decently common, but she wondered how hers differed. Could she grow individual parts of her body? How about a specific size? What's the limit of her size? Muttering and taking notes, she heard a man say right next to her. He had little starfish shapes on the side of his head. Seems like you're planning on being a hero. Good luck, kid. He gave her a thumbs up. Her eyes sparkled a little as she smiled at him. Thank you. Soon she had to hurry to Aldra to start the day. Although it wasn't very eventful, at least not yet. It was another usual school day. She was really the only one paying attention to the lecture. It was the same stuff she was used to, so there wasn't much she would be missing. But there was a part of her that stubbornly listened to it regardless, so she wouldn't stoop to the level of the other students. Soon, the teacher pulled out a stack of papers from his desk drawer and was inches away from putting them on the table. I'd usually give out your future career forms, the teacher said, before throwing them, the papers scattering all across the room, as if a storm had made its way into the classroom, but I assume you all want to be heroes. Izumi sat stiffly in her seat as everyone else cheered and shouted, high fives passing between friends, fist bumps exchanged all around, some accidentally using their quirk, including Kaken, who was as boastful as usual. Not that it mattered, as if the teacher cared at all. If he did, he would have stopped the bullying years ago. She desperately wanted to join in the celebration but knew it would do her more harm than good. You're going to UA as well, isn't that right, Midoriya? She heard the teacher say. Immediately, the class turned to stare at her before Kaken burst into laughter, as if he thought what their teacher said was some kind of joke. Some other giggles joined in, which she assumed were his small group of friends. Seriously, what was so wrong with her? That she deserved this treatment? To be laughed at? As if almost on instinct, she moved all her school supplies, as well as her personal notebooks off her desk and into her backpack, a sparkling palm coming down on her table and charring the center with a small explosion. Oi Izumi! You're still dreaming of getting into a hero school? Kaken scowled. Izumi sighed. Yeah, what about it? She said it so unconsciously that she didn't realize how annoyed she sounded until she overheard murmurs around the room. No one ever had the guts to talk back to Kaken, not even a little. But as she clearly proved, Izumi was anything but the norm here. You giving me attitude? That's new. Why are you even bothering anyways? I don't know. Why do you even care? The hell did you say? The boy shouted, Izumi covering her ears. She soon felt the front of her school uniform grasped, being pulled in by the blonde. You trying to play smart with me? Don't forget, you're only as average as you are now because of my quirk in your arsenal, got it? Hey, Bakugo, don't you think you're being a little harsh? A student said. Bakugo glared at them, and his prey quickly went back into the cage that was their seat. Well, at least someone stood up for her for once. She could feel the palm of Kaken's hand flaring up. There was also a light. Was he really about to try to release an explosion on her? Not even he's that stupid, right? Let's make this clear, Izumi. You're nothing. You rely on others' talents to have one of your own. A true hero could stand on their own, but you're just a copy of anyone your eyes lay upon. So why don't you take a hike and find a place where you're actually worth a DMN? Kaken chided, each word tinged with disdain. As a quiet anger rose to the surface, Izumi sighed heavily as her eyes glowed faintly, spreading out a pair of wings that swiped at Kaken's legs. He didn't fall, but he was forced to stumble and release his grip on her. Gasps echoed across the room as Izumi's usually bright eyes soon dimmed most of the hopeful light. With a tired expression, she put on her backpack and made her way out of the classroom. Midoriya, where are you going? Her teacher shouted. You shouldn't be using your quirk in class for one. And apologized to Bakugo. That made her pause at the door. She felt her fists clenching at her side, before she grabbed the door handle, opened it, and slammed it shut in one fell swoop. After that, she quickly walked out of the school. She didn't want to stay there any longer than she had to. She had to get out of there. Away from them. Away from him. Everyone. She started running, her feet practically crashing against the concrete. She wanted to be home. She wanted to be with her mom. And if not her, she wanted to be alone. No one else. Just her. Hey Kaken. When we grow up, let's be heroes together. But, just why? Sure, Izumi, but no getting in my way. What happened to those times? Everything used to feel so bright. So why now have they? A sudden sloshing sound brought her out of her daze. She hadn't paid attention to where she was going. She seemed to be in some tunnel. She couldn't figure out. But more importantly, there was a weird slithering sound from behind her. A medium-sized body? Perfect. Before she could react, her body immediately became numb and air became scarce as someone began to encase her in the gooey substance that was their own sludge-covered body. What was this? A villain? Was a villain attacking her? What should she do? Should she defend herself? But what were the laws about defending yourself with a quirk again? That didn't matter, she should just be doing something. Saving herself. I'm just hijacking your body, no big deal. Now just stand still and be nice and quiet for me, the sludge villain said. Go. Izumi managed to get out, as she outreached her arms and attempted to press it against the monster. She tried her best to focus, remembering all the information about the explosion quirk and attempted to let out as big of an explosion as possible. But it was all for naught, as soon her arm went numb from the lack of oxygen. This couldn't be it. She didn't want to die. Please don't let her die here. Never fear, young lady. For I am here. Izumi's eyes widened. That voice. No way. It couldn't be, could it? Clear as day, right in front of her, as if she were reading a comic book. It was All Might, jumping out of the sewers and appearing right in front of her. As if to get a second wind, her falling arm regained some strength, and fired off a single explosion to make the sludge monster sear with pain, and more important, release most of its hold on her. Ack! The villain cried. You little brat. Nice one, kid. All Might shouted. Now. Texas. Smash. Izumi finally caught her breath as a massive gust of air swept through the tunnel, smashing against the sludge villain. He was pushed back against the wall, parts of him seemingly scattered, though it didn't appear to cause serious harm. Izumi was physically unharmed, but in that moment, her eyes instinctively locked onto All Might. More specifically, his quirk. She just needed a visual clue, and that attack he threw was more than enough. Did this count as stealing? Was the #1 hero even okay with this? It was too late, that's just what her eyes did after all. But soon she sank to her knees. Her mind flooded with information. Not just that. A barrage of static images, different colors of light, the sensation of something powerful and resonant. Her head felt like it was about to explode, as if a sledgehammer was being driven into her skull. The last thing she saw was a man in white hair, all but one eye covered by his hair, looking straight at her. Are you? Kid, are you all right? Izumi's head finally stopped hurting as she regained her senses, the sound of her favorite hero drawing her back out. However, her mind was still abuzz with many thoughts and questions. What was that? She knew her quirk could consume the information of a quirk's history to some extent, but that felt different from other times she'd used it. Maybe it's a new aspect of her quirk she hadn't yet tried before? She did recently have that weird vision of an inner world of sorts. So, are you there, young lady? Are you injured? Izumi blushed, realizing she had almost started a mental storm of rambling. She scratched the back of her head as she focused on. All Might, she shouted. That would be me. All Might replied. I am not injured, I think I'm okay. Just a bit of a migraine. Glad that's the only bit of pain. And once again, splendid job on your attack on the villain. Using it in self-defense to keep yourself safe is always advisable, I'd say. Just remember not to use it when there's no danger, understood? Izumi nodded excitedly, but looked around. Speaking of the villain, where exactly did it go? Why, he's right here. All Might presented Izumi a plastic bottle, which contained the dastardly villain inside. He looked quite comfy. That's amazing. Taken out in just one punch as well. It's all in a day's work. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must return this villain to the slammer where he belongs. Izumi gasped as her fingers trembled, swiftly reaching for her well-worn notebook tucked in her bag. She needed the man too, and to her astonishment, it was already signed with his autograph. It was unmistakable. His handwriting and everything. He truly was a legend. She glanced back over at her hero, who was illuminated by the glowing afternoon sun. She watched eagerly as the symbol of peace, with his muscular legs tensed, braced himself before preparing to leap away, harnessing every ounce of strength. Even if just for a moment, she was happy to finally witness him in person, not merely from a screen or the video she had watched countless times, but in person. She could feel her heart swelling, a happiness she hadn't felt in so long. She was happy. So incredibly happy. And yet, wait, please. All Might turned around slowly, his sharp and hopeful gaze once again fixed on the girl he had just saved from the brink of doom. She looked, in a moment of quiet after the chaos, different from before. Nervous wasn't quite the right word he was looking for. She appeared visibly tense, her hands trembling slightly, but behind that nervousness, there was a clear sense of determination blazing in her eyes. For what, he wasn't quite sure. But it drew him in, and now he was all too curious to understand what. Yes? What is it? All Might asked. Why, see, I have a quirk that allows me to copy the quirk of those I look at. Assuming they have a visual indicator, that is. She noticed All Might pausing, his expression a little different than before, his smile slightly less curved. Was that a sense of worry on his face? But shortly after, his usual bright smile was back on his face. But, see, quite the quirk you have there. Is that all you wanted to say? He asked. She gulped, before continuing. For some time, I've been dealing with lots of bullying, even by someone I considered a lifelong friend. I've been told over and over and over again that my quirk is only good when I rely on other people, meaning I have no talent of my own, despite spending years of my life trying to make the best use out of these quirks that I love so much. So I want to ask. Izumi's mouth opened again, hesitantly this time, her lips parting as she struggled to find the right words. Her breath hitched unexpectedly, tightening her chest, and no sound came from her throat. She took a slow, deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs, then looked directly at All Might. She couldn't see her eyes, but something inside told her they were filled with a stronger sense of purpose than ever before, despite the feeling of tears building up. She briefly closed her eyes, gathered her courage, and her words, now clearer and more resonant, echoed loudly through the dim tunnel. Can someone with a quirk like mine be considered a real hero? It felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of her sails as she felt her knees tremble. The only thing keeping her standing was her own willpower. She had no one believing in her except her mom. But if anyone knew what was best, it was the hero she admired so much, right? So she stood there, holding her breath, awaiting either a sense of relief or dread. What's your name, young lady? All Might said. She was a little taken aback, but she answered. I Izumi Midoriya. Midoriya Shoujo, let me be the first to tell you this. In this line of work, no hero is truly on their own. Oh, you must see it, many heroes left and right having rivalries or competing for their spots in the rankings. But at the end of the day, many heroes will come together to fight for a cause. Heroes help each other, inspire one another. Even me, the symbol of peace, may require help at times. With each generation, we grow as a people. All Might, she whispered. Her eyes widened as she watched the man's light blue eyes appear remarkably reassuring. One way or another, whether it's because of your efforts or through the help of others, as long as you help people, save people, that's what truly matters. The ability to make others' strength your own is a talent. The power you hold, if it is as you say it is, then yes, Midoriya Shoujo. Izumi was so overwhelmed that she couldn't move. Any thought of falling to the ground or hiding her face had completely faded into sheer awe. She could feel tears welling up as she heard the words she'd been longing for. You can be a real hero. She cried. She couldn't hold it in. She covered her face, trying to hide her tears with her hands. Was she weird for crying? For showing such deep emotion in front of someone she considers her idol? She should stop and actually talk. She tried to reach out to All Might again, but realized he was gone. Oh no, did she say something wrong somehow? She glanced around the general area, before finding a small note on the ground. Remember to always smile and do your best. All Might. Through tears and overwhelming emotion, Izumi managed her usual smile. She gazed at the note for a few moments, her fingers trembling slightly. Then she rummaged quickly through her backpack, pulling out a slightly worn notebook and a small roll of tape. She carefully affixed the note to the front cover of her most treasured possession, a notebook labeled, "For My Future," in her neat handwriting. It was perfect. Despite the danger she had just faced, possibly near death, she found a strange comfort from the situation. She was a little glad she had been caught by that sludge villain. After all, not every day does one receive a personal note of encouragement from the #1 hero. "Do my best." "Yeah, I will," she smiled. Bakugo groaned aloud as he leaned back in his chair, glaring out of the dusty, smudged window of his classroom. His eyes focused on the bright, but cloudy blue sky outside, trying to block out the monotonous, half-butted start-of-school speech his teacher was rambling through. The teacher's voice droned on with clichés about safety and preparedness warnings that, to Bakugo, seemed utterly pointless. To him, such nonsensical advice didn't matter. His mind was already fixated on his future as a hero, a powerful, wealthy, and famous one. That dream had been etched into his mind since he discovered his quirk. Nothing was going to shake his certainty that he was destined for greatness. Especially not Izumi. Speaking of Izumi, where the hell was she at? Or more importantly, what exactly was she thinking in that moment? She managed to land a lucky hit on him, sure, but did she really believe she could stand her ground against someone as amazing and talented as him? She'd always been like that. Every time he'd try to make others learn their place, she'd step in and defend them. It only got more annoying once she gained her quirk. But even with all her stolen quirks, she was still Izumi. Utterly useless and worthless. The fact that she had a quirk that copied others' abilities proved that much to him. Yet to him, she seemed to underestimate his strength. To look down on him. He growled as he thought back on how she was acting towards him. But he was sure she'd come running back and apologize like she always did. As if right on cue, the classroom door swung open, and the annoying, freckled girl he'd known for years stepped through. He was the first to glare, but something in him froze. She looked different somehow. He shook his head. What was he thinking? It was Izumi. Izumi. Why would he bother thinking more than a second about something different about her, something probably so insignificant? Midoriya, I'll let your temporary absence slide, but if you're serious about a hero school, that is a habit I suggest you put to rest. Teacher scolded. He heard Izumi take a deep, watching her stupidly bow to their teacher. My apologies, sensei. The rest of the school day slipped by in a haze, the minutes dull and blurry. There wasn't much on the agenda to start with, and even less that was memorable for the blonde boy, who was lost in his own thoughts. But that wasn't the most important thing. What really mattered was how Izumi completely ignored him. What might usually be childlike innocence had been replaced with an indifferent gaze that was fixed solely on the book in front of her. Was she trying to look down on him again? That question tugged at his mind like a rope. It embarrassed him, but more importantly, made him irrationally angry. As soon as the bell rang, he shot up from his chair and stomped over to Izumi's seat. He slammed his hand down on her table, the girl seemingly predicting it, as she slid her belongings off her table. Oh, she thought she was funny, huh? I see what you're doing, Izumi, he said. Izumi looked up at him, her face clearly colored with displeasure as she sighed. Bakugo's eye twitched at that response, as he attempted to grab at Izumi's shirt again, before having his hand slapped away. She looked at him dead in the eyes. What am I doing exactly, Katsuki? Ah. Izumi stood up from her seat with a grace you wouldn't think possible for such a simple motion. When I left school today, I didn't have any intention of coming back. I thought it would have been better to just leave and hide away, not to bother anyone ever again. But that would be giving you exactly what you want, right? After thinking long and hard about it, I finally realize what kind of person you are. I used to admire you, cherish you, since we were little. But you are nothing like the Kaken I knew. Instead, the Katsuki Bakugo standing right in front of me is someone who doesn't respect anyone but himself. But because you're afraid. Even more afraid of me. You're scared that I'll end up so far ahead of you, so much better than you, that you'll lose the only purpose others and even you have built up for yourself. Once I fought back, it would all be over for you. Well, I'm not having that. I won't let myself fall behind you just so you can feel good about yourself. Bakugo felt his entire world spinning upside down, right side up, through every possible configuration. What did she just say? What was she saying? What utter bullshit was she spouting? He watched as she silently put on her backpack and made her way to the door. Before she left, she turned around one last time. From now on, I'll truly be Izumi Midoriya, a girl who will be whatever she wants to be. And it begins with this. Katsuki Bakugo, I'm ending our so-called friendship. Goodbye, for now at least, she said, watching Katsuki's jaw drop to the floor, before walking right out. Outside the school, she took a long, deep breath. Somehow, the air felt even fresher than before. Being able to say those words, after all the years of built-up anguish, all the bullying and belittling, she felt free from it all for the first time in her life. She took out her special notebook, looking at the words plastered on the front. For my future, remember to always smile and do your best. From now on, she will walk her own path, so no one can hold her back. She won't cling to the past, but instead look forward to a brighter future. Because she is Izumi Midoriya, the girl who will always give her best, wearing a smile on her face. The sun brightly shone on the Midoriya residence, streaming through Izumi's slightly open curtains and illuminating her. Her eyes were barely open, squinting as the bright light hit her eyes. She must have forgotten to shut the curtains all the way. She slowly got out of bed, her curly green hair more frizzy than usual, yawning as she quickly pulled the fabric to block the blinding light. She had trained her butt off yesterday, hell, the past couple of years. She needed a nice, long rest before she could even think about getting up today. She pulled up her covers and climbed back in bed. A slight hum was all she mustered as she quickly drifted into another sleep. "Oh my God, it's exam day," she screamed. What happened next was pure chaos. Both Izumi and Inko hurried around the apartment, doing everything they could to get ready. Tripping over each other, Izumi eating and getting dressed at the same time and almost spilling her water, Inko trying to hold back tears because of how important today was, and failing many times. "Mom, where's my tracksuit?" Izumi shouted. "Top drawer." Inko shouted back. "Did you finish eating?" "Yes, Mom." "Backpack?" "Yes." "Phone?" "Yes." "Toothbrush?" "Why what no? I'm coming right back home." "Sorry, sweetie. I'm just so anxious for you." After what felt like an eternity, but was actually no more than 5, maybe 10 minutes, Izumi was finally ready. Fully dressed in her usual middle school uniform, complete with her worn yellow backpack slung over her shoulder, she couldn't help but smile as she took a moment to admire her reflection in the mirror. Despite the rush, she had managed to freshen up her appearance. She still couldn't believe the day had come. She looked at the clock and realized the train would be arriving soon. She hurriedly ran to the door, but felt her hand being squeezed. She turned around to see her mom right behind her. "You can do this, Izumi. Please be careful," Inko softly smiled. Izumi could only stare before she returned with a smile of her own. "Thank you, Mom." With those words, she made her way out of the apartment and sprinted toward the train station. Luckily, she was right on time and found a seat. It had only been around 10 months since All Might had spoken those words of encouragement to her, but they inspired her like no one had before. She stood up to Katsuki and dedicated herself to her training more than ever over the past year. Everything seemed to be falling into place. However, she'd been trying to emanate some of All Might's power, to no avail. Every time she tried, her brain would flood with too much information, giving her a temporary migraine. With no clear solution, she's put it on the back burner for now. That's the least of her worries, however. Now, all that remained was to take the entrance exam, and she would be set. The only question was, could she do it? UA was considered Japan's top hero academy, the kind of place where you're set for the rest of your life. That alone made her sure it wouldn't be easy, but even more than that, what if she just wasn't good enough? What if she hadn't trained as hard as everyone else? No, she dismissed that last thought. She was confident that she had trained harder than anyone else. But because of the extensive time and effort invested in each quirk she had gained, she hadn't fully mastered them, far from it. She understood she was a versatile, jack-of-all-trades type, but she embraced that fact. That didn't mean she wouldn't give her all. Not by a long shot. As she zoned back into reality, she was here. She was here at the examination site. It almost didn't feel real. She took a few steps forward, feeling lighter than air. But then the anxiety took over, that lightness turning into a heavy sensation, as if she had been thrown into a pool without knowing how to swim. Despite that, she shook her head vigorously. She'd been waiting for this day for God knows how long. She couldn't chicken out now. She took a deep breath, her nerves easing just a little. Her eyes fixated on the towering building in front of her. With this next step, she thought, I'll pave the way for a bright future. She tripped. Or I'll fall flat on my face. Her face was just inches from the pavement before her fall came to a screeching halt. That's weird. She had been expecting her face to be feeling excruciating pain right about now. What changed? She then realized that someone's arm was wrapped around her waist, lifting her before putting her back up to her feet. Hey, are you okay? A female voice asked. She finally looked at the person who had just stopped her from splattering the ground with a red stain, only to be greeted with the color red herself. Well, more like a reddish-brown, but she digressed. She opened her mouth to say something, but when she looked at her, really looked at her, she hesitated to speak. She didn't dress excessively. She wore rather simple clothes, blue slim straight jeans and a t-shirt, which was covered by a black buttoned coat. There was nothing wrong with it, quite the opposite actually. For some reason, she just felt stunned, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. It was an odd feeling. Was her face burning? I think so. I'm sorry you had to catch me like that, she said. The girl shrugged. It's not a problem for me. After all, heroes are supposed to save people. Izumi's eyebrows raised slightly. Oh, you're taking the exam as well? I've been getting ready for it for a while now, the girl replied. I'm Shirou, by the way. Shirou Emiya. Oh. Izumi blushed, parting her hair. I never introduced myself, did I? I'm Izumi Midoriya. It's very nice to meet you, Emiya-kun. Shirou smiled. Same to you, and Emiya-chan is okay. Somehow, Izumi blushed even more. But she cleared her throat. Surprised that a girl has such a masculine name. Shirou shrugged. I don't really mind it. I like the name anyways. Shall we head in? Izumi nodded. Absolutely. Izumi felt her arm get shoved as someone pushed past her, their movement very slouchy, but she could tell it was deliberate. She took a moment to collect herself from the sudden push, focusing on the person who pushed past her, about to speak her mind. But that familiar blonde hair made her tense up a bit. Not out of fear, but out of she didn't know what. She hadn't spoken to, nor heard from, Katsuki in so long. She made it clear they were no longer friends, and he seemed content with that, based on his apparent lack of change. Despite what had happened, she wanted to say something to him. But what was there to say? Shirou grimaced as she moved toward the other boy, but Izumi stepped in, blocking her way with a hand on her chest. Midoriya? Shirou snapped her out of her daze. Is something the matter? Let's go, Emiya-kun, she whispered, walking ahead of the girl, who was following relatively close behind. They entered the building, and any and all intruding thoughts washed away as a new feeling of uncertainty took full hold. After finding their seats in the auditorium, they were given a speech by none other than President Mike himself, who was as loud as you'd expect him to be. He explained the basics of the exam in two parts, the written exam and the practical exam. The written exam was, as you'd expect, designed to test your knowledge of heroics, or else they might assume you wandered in here unprepared. The practical exam was much more important. To put it simply, you would be placed in an urban area with robot villains, each assigned a specific number of points, which you must use your quirks to eliminate the machines and earn those points. It sounds simple enough. It made Izumi feel a lot better. That's what she thought when she got into her tracksuit. Not that it sounded easy. In all honesty, she was glad she wasn't quirkless for this, no offense to them, of course. Just the idea of facing something like that without powers? That thought terrified her. Luckily, she had a very versatile quirk on her hands. Speaking of quirks, she turned her head to see the girl she had just met, Shirou Emiya, seemingly taking deep breaths. She must be nervous. She was sure everyone else here was. Well, Maybe except for Katsuki, who was probably off somewhere gloomy in a corner. But her curiosity couldn't help but wonder, what was her quirk? Stopping her stretches, she was about to approach her. "What are you doing?" Hoping to interrupt her, Izumi jumped slightly, then calmed down when she realized it was just the boy from the auditorium, who looked very similar to the pro hero, Ingenium. Actually, they had many visual similarities aside from the glasses. Maybe they were related? Now that she had a better look at him, she noticed that at the bottom of his legs were a pair of engines, just like Ingenium's. As always, as soon as she spotted the quirk's indicator, her quirk immediately copied it. She wasn't doing it on purpose, she swore. "That's not it," she replied. "I just wanted to ask her about." And begin. Everyone looked towards the familiar booming voice. "Well, don't just stand there. The exam is starting. Get going." Present Mike shouted. Izumi watched as everyone quickly sprinted across the examination grounds, with her and Shirou trailing by just a few seconds. The loss of those few seconds still felt very crucial, but she could make up for that in a big way. Her eyes glowed as she threw her arms back and cupped her palms, releasing explosions from her hands and propelling herself forward over the other examinees. It seemed the Ingenium lookalike was catching up rather quickly, although calling him Ida seemed more fitting due to their striking resemblance. "They're fast," Shirou muttered. She felt the ground shake as she saw a group of one-pointers making a wreck of buildings. She bolted towards them, speeding up even further, closing her eyes as she approached the mechanical menaces. Judging the concept of creation. Hypothesizing the basic structure. Duplicating the composition material. Imitating the skill of its making. Sympathizing with the experience of its growth. Reproducing the accumulated years. Excelling every manufacturing process. From her hands, the familiar twin blades appeared. Without hesitation, she threw the pair, slicing through one of the robots with ease, then projected a new set to cut through the metal limbs of the next one-pointer one by one. The last one-pointer launched an attack, attempting to smash her with one of its arms, but Shirou deftly dodged. Finally, the other pair of Kansho and Bakuya swung back around, slashing at the surface of the one-pointer before she leaped behind it and swung her current blades down its back, completely taking it out of commission. 3 points in less than 20 seconds. "Decent start," she said. She suddenly heard screeching screams. Quickly turning her head, she saw a few hero students struggling to fend off a three-pointer and failing miserably at it. She promptly focused once more, the green energy from her quirk materializing into both a bow and another sword, which she transformed into a projectile. She took action and lined up her shot, aiming straight for the middle. She was sure it would hit, given the weapon she was firing. "I am the bone of my sword." Grunting. She shouted, firing the sword-turned arrow and piercing it, followed by a massive explosion. 3 more points. But that mattered little, compared to the relieved faces of those she saved. Shirou Emiya, quirk, projection. Although more proficient with swords, the quirk enables Shirou to analyze the structure, composition, and history of weapons and objects, recreating them from memory. However, it can take a toll on her mind depending on how much or how she uses it. Time passed, and Izumi was tackling her own swarm of rampant robots. She found herself surrounded, with at most 2 of these machines on each side. To her left were 2 two-pointers, behind her were 2 one-pointers, to her right was another one-pointer, and directly ahead was a 3-pointer. This alone added up to 10 points, but other students nearby were also fighting them, so she needed to act quickly. The 3-pointer fired missiles at her, but she used explosion to maneuver and avoid them. Using this acceleration, she landed 2 hands on the nearby pair of one-pointers and shattered them into tiny pieces, then used that momentum to propel herself toward the pair of 2-pointers. The robots see her flying by and try to knock her out of the sky, but she narrowly avoids their attacks. Her eyes glow again, and strings of fibers shoot out from her tracksuit, immediately surrounding the machines. Fiber Master proved useful in concealing a group of opponents within a specific area. She takes this chance to use explosion once more and starts smashing at them until they're nothing but pieces of metal on the ground. She usually didn't like the brute force approach, but explosion was her strongest offensive quirk. She landed safely on the ground, turning to face the three-pointer. The last one-pointer wasn't worth her attention. She needed to focus on the bigger threat. Izumi Midoriya Quirk Replication. The quirk allows Izumi to analyze someone's quirk by seeing a visual indicator of that quirk. Once the requirement is met, her brain is filled with information to replicate it, though she still needs to train to use the quirk effectively. It also allows her body to adapt to certain conditions associated with a quirk, though this varies depending on the quirk. Similar to Shirou, her mind is affected depending on how much she uses her quirk. She caught her breath and was about to launch herself at the three-pointer when the ground suddenly shook violently. It wasn't a normal tremor, not at all. Neither from something falling over nor from any of the students' quirks. A wave of dread washed over her as she slowly turned her head, a shiver crawling down her spine. Z0, she stumbled. 0-pointer. Students started running as fast as they could. She even noticed the Ida person using his engines to make a mad dash. There was no point in fighting that monstrosity, you don't get a single point out of it. So Izumi's eyes glowed. She prepared to use engine to help her get as far away as possible. Ow! The sound of someone in pain suddenly caught her attention, prompting her to quickly survey her surroundings for any signs of the injured individual. From afar, she saw a girl with slightly tangled brown hair, her jacket stained from lying on the ground. She looked exhausted and tried to keep her balance as she struggled to lift herself. Just behind her, the zero-pointer robot was looming silently, its 8 glowing red eyes fixed on her, ready to attack at any moment. Izumi's eyes widened and she yelled, "Move!" The machine moved its arm forward, and its massive hand moved so quickly that the force pushed aside the dust and dirt in the air. Izumi tried to act quickly, but she knew she wouldn't make it in time. It was about to crush her. It was going to kill that girl. And if not kill, definitely injure her enough to say goodbye to any dreams of being a hero. Time felt as if it had slowed down, like Izumi's mind was trying to prevent the inevitable. It got closer and closer. It was hopeless. Row Ajax. The clanging of metal reverberated throughout the area as the robot unleashed its full might with its hand. However, its attack failed to connect to its target. Just below, in front of the exhausted girl, stood Shirou, holding up a translucent, glowing purple shield against the cold metal of the palm. Izumi stood there, honestly stunned that the girl was able to put up such a front against the mech. Nice. Shirou grunted, grinding her teeth as she fought to hold her ground. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Izumi. Midoriya, go. She didn't need to tell her twice, as she cycled through the list of quirks she had at her disposal. The combination she was about to go with would be perfect. Her eyes once more, her size growing dramatically as she activated gigantification, able to match the mechanical menace. At the same time, she opens her palm and activates explosion, sending it toward the center of the robot. She didn't know exactly what she was feeling in this moment, but it was like anxiety mixed with a sense of exhilaration she'd never experienced before, which even dulled the headache she was beginning to feel. To have someone supporting her while she delivers the final blow. She felt like a true hero on the battlefield. Hey Kaken, when you become a hero, what's a move you want to create? That's easy. It would have to be. I have to take the name of your move for this one, Katsuki, she whispered, slamming her hand, the sweat she built up smacking against the face of the robot, unleashing a massive burst of flames and smoke. Howitzer impact. Half of the machine was entirely reduced to ash, with no recognizable remnants remaining, completely vaporized by the blast. The other half was heavily charred, its metal surface melting gradually under the relentless, searing heat. And that's time, folks. The end of the exam. Present Mix's voice echoed. Izumi deactivated all her quirks, kneeling on one knee with her hand pressed against the ground to steady herself, her breathing ragged and rough. She was physically worn out, with tired muscles and a few minor scrapes from debris, but aside from that, she was mostly unharmed. However, a relentless pounding headache throbbed behind her temples, making it hard to concentrate. She'd been practicing switching between quirks and using multiple quirks at once, but in a real battle, It was more complicated than she thought. She quickly ran up to Shirou and the girl, grabbing both of their arms as she helped them up. "Are you two okay?" Shirou panted, but gave a small thumbs up. "Yeah, I'm fine. What about you?" "I'm okay, Emiya-kun," she replied, then focusing her attention on the girl. "How about you? You look exhausted." The girl just laughed nervously and scratched the side of her head. "I'm all right. Just tripped and fell, I guess. I am so sorry you had to step in like that. I'm just glad you're okay. And we want to be heroes, so it's sorta in our job description. And my name is Izumi Midoriya, by the way," she said. Shirou coughed. "I'm Shirou Emiya." "I'm Ochako Uraraka," the girl said, giving them a bright smile. "Thank you for saving me." It had been over a week since the UA entrance exam. Shirou hadn't had any contact with Midoriya or Uraraka ever since the end of it. They did talk for a little while afterwards, but she didn't bother to get their contact information or anything else. It wasn't like she was nervous about that sort of thing, it just didn't cross her mind at all. They seemed pretty nice. She'd like to get to know them better, especially the Midoriya girl. She was relaxing in her room when it happened. "Wani-chan! Wani-chan!" Ilya shouted, practically forcing her way through her bedroom door. Shirou pet her head to the side. "Ilya, what are you doing? I've told you before to knock." "It's here." "What's here?" "Your letter from you dummy." She sprang from her bed in an instant, snatching the letter from her hands as she dashed towards the kitchen. Naturally, Iris and Kiritsugu were there, along with Iris's bodyguard, Artoria. Shirou hadn't met Artoria on her first day at the house, but she'd been warming up to her. However, she had little time to dwell on the details as she tore the letter apart, revealing a small device inside. "Is that what I think it is?" Iris asked, eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Yeah, it is," Shirou replied. "Well, let's not waste any more time. Do you want to watch too, Artoria?" Kiritsugu asked the blonde. I suppose I can," she replied, standing up and taking her place next to Iris. Everyone gathered around Shirou, who stood in the center of the group and pressed a small button on the device. That appeared to be the correct choice, as a light emanated from the center of the circular object, projecting a screen into the air. "This is a projection," All Might said. Shirou and everyone else were taken aback. Was that All Might, the symbol of peace, talking directly to them on a video? Is that All Might, the symbol of peace, talking directly to us on a video? Izumi and Inko shouted. "You may be surprised to see me. Am I here, you may ask? Why, I'm teaching at you, that's why," he said. "But let me not waste any more time. Let me explain the results. Izumi Midoriya, you scored 30 villain points. But because of your outstanding smashing of that villain and rescuing your fellow examinee, putting yourself in harm's way, you scored 60 rescue points. 90 points in total." Izumi froze, her heart pounding. Was this all a dream? Was she still asleep? Did she need to pinch herself to wake up? Tears welled up in her eyes, but the comforting embrace of her mother told her everything this was real. "Shirou Emiya, you scored 27 villain points. But because of your outstanding assistance in shielding your fellow examinee, all while under pressure, you scored 50 rescue points. 77 points in total." Shirou felt herself trembling for the first time in years. Her knees felt weak, but she wasn't feeling sad or anything like that. She was just wondering if this was real or not, if all of this wasn't just a fantasy, if she still wasn't somehow buried underneath the rubble of that cruel fire. "Shirou Emiya, Izumi Midoriya, you pass. Welcome to UA High School, your hero academy." That day and night, both Midoriya's and Emiya's homes were filled with tears of joy as they celebrated as if there were no tomorrow. This was their first step. They were both on the first step toward realizing their childhood dreams. And they couldn't ask for anything more. Shoyuta hated meetings. They were almost always important. Or at least that's what he's told by Nedzu. Bad incidents that he needed to clean up, paperwork that needed to be signed for some arbitrary reason, a student doing something wrong, or just doing some of Nedzu's dirty work, he was always being summoned for something. And sure, Given whatever context of the situation at the time, it could be considered important. But sometimes it felt like he was the only teacher at UA with how often he gets called upon, not to mention the workload. And no, he wasn't lazy. Sleep-deprived was a more accurate way to describe it. Regardless, he was again walking to Nedzu's office for another meeting. A quick meeting, his superior told him. If there's one thing Shou hates more than meetings, it's quick meetings. If it's supposed to be so quick, then why couldn't this be discussed over the phone or, better yet, in an email? He'd prefer that over walking all the way over here for every little thing that's asked of him. He shook the thoughts out of his head, letting a heavy sigh escape his lips as he approached Nedzu's office, the door already opened wide for him to enter. Stepping inside, he smelled the savory scent of tea before he closed the doors behind him. "Ah, Aizawa. Welcome. Please take a seat," Nedzu smiled. He sighed. He'd rather stand if it's to be over and done with, but trying to budge with Nedzu was as effective as talking to a brick wall. He slowly walked over, his black eyes simply scanning the freshly cleaned carpet across the floor of the principal's office. He took his seat, slouching in the chair without so much as a care in the world. Nedzu took a sip of his tea, set it down on its saucer, then clasped his paws together and looked straight ahead at him. "Now, I'm sure you're wondering why you were summoned here." "As I do every meeting, yes," he replied. "It's in regards to our two recent highest-ranking examinees in the entrance exam, Izumi Midoriya and Shirou Emiya." Emiya HM? That name sure rang some bells for the Erasure hero. I remember. You were deciding which of the two was going into I or Can's class. Correct, and I've made my decision. As of tomorrow, both of them will be in class 1A. Shuda's eyebrows furrowed, looking a little irritated. "May I ask why?" Nedzu tilted his head. "Is there a problem, Aizawa? You told me that Midoriya would work better in my class, requiring my, as you described it, harsher nature, while Emiya would do better in Can's class since she was considered less demanding. May I ask why the sudden change?" Nedzu giggled, which just ticked him off if anything. Call it a hunch, but after seeing their performance at the exam, they have the potential to be quite compatible. I think you're the right person to bring out their full capabilities. Those two will go places under your care. His eyes widened. Hearing that kind of confidence about his ability from Nedzu was something of a rarity. He still wasn't exactly thrilled about such a last-minute change, but hey, what could he do? A hunch, eh? All right then. I'll handle the both of them. Who will Emiya be replacing then? I believe it was Tsuburaba-kun we were considering putting in 1A, so we'll switch him to 1B. Got it? If that's all. Not yet. Nedzu put his paw up. One last thing. He mentally groaned. What would that be? I think we'll start this year off a little more interesting this time. He raised an eyebrow. How do you mean? Nedzu smiled. Well, I was considering that we push one of our later exercises to the beginning of this year, pairing 1A and 1B in the exercises together. Shou rubbed at his eyes, feeling them grow even more bloodshot. Tell me you're joking. I assure you I'm not, Nedzu replied pleasantly. Both classes will do their usual training exercises together. It seems beneficial to everyone, does it not? On paper, sure, it doesn't sound that bad, he muttered. But this is the start of the year. I'm supposed to get my students in order, see where each of them stands, what they need to work on, and the direction they should go. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. I don't need Can's class to disrupt the focus of mine. Nedzu's smile only widened. But having the two classes collaborate more often, building their friendships and dynamics, wouldn't that be more interesting? Interesting? Shou pinched the bridge of his nose. Throwing 40 rowdy, hero-hungry students onto the same training grounds. Sounds like a recipe for disaster. Or for growth. Nedzu said cheerfully. I know you have your concerns, but trust me, Aizawa. This will work out spectacularly for both classes, I assure you. Shou crossed his arms and sighed heavily before replying. How can you be so sure of that? And why this year of all years? I have it all planned out right here, Nedzu tapped his head. To allay your worries, the quirk apprehension test will still be for the classes to perform on their own. As for why, I have my reasons. But that's a discussion for another day. His eyes drifted downward as he looked at the carpet, deep in thought, really thinking about whether this was a good idea or not. The cons were already laid out in his mind. It would be overwhelming all at once, a lot of workload. Plus, they'd have to readjust their schedule to accommodate all the students. But trying to be fair with the pros, he supposed it would help accelerate everyone's growth. And the sports festival was the kind of event that pushed classes to challenge each other, so having that same motivation for earlier in the year wasn't exactly a bad thing. It could make his job easier in some aspects. Oh God, he was actually starting to agree with Ned's reasoning. His constant secrets were starting to piss him off, however. Okay, he conceded. I'll see what I can do. I appreciate your time, Aizawa. That was all I wanted to discuss. I promise to provide you more details at a later date, Nedzu said. Shoyuta nodded quietly, stood up from his chair, and made his way out of the office door, soon slipping his hands into his pockets. He let out a sigh of irritation. Although he didn't usually smoke, he really wished he could right now. This year was already looking to be quite a long one. Izumi walked step by step, gazing at the monolith that was UA High School. She still couldn't quite believe that she was really there, at UA, in her UA uniform. Almost every night, she dreamed of attending this school and working towards becoming an incredible hero, but she always woke up feeling it was just a dream. Now, though, it was real. Certainly it was. By then she was expecting herself to hesitate, to try and turn back and simply believe she couldn't do it. But she had gotten this far, and was full of dopamine. With a big wide smile, she sprinted her way across the entranceway and through the multitude of hallways, trying to find her classroom. The school was just as she imagined, only even more impressive. It was large and slightly confusing in layout, but she was confident she could adjust and learn. She tried her best not to bump into any students. Her excitement was through the roof, impossible to contain. After wandering around to admire the school's interior, she made her way to the actual classroom. A few more steps later and there was the sign, 1A. She took a deep breath. Aside from Emiya and Uraraka, she hadn't had much social interaction. Her class treated her mostly fairly, except for Katsuki's little group, but she didn't really have a true friend or social connection. This was her chance to change that. She opened the door and saw a scene before her. Remove your foot from that desk this instant. Such an action disrespects those who came to UA before us and the craftsman who made the desk. Ida chided. Katsuki chuckled. You think I give a DMN? Sit down, you extra. Izumi wasn't exactly surprised to see Katsuki, but she hoped he wasn't in her class. She was trying to move on from their friendship and not have any of that past weigh her down. Being in a class with him was going to make that even harder. She just hoped they weren't right next to each other. Her eyes accidentally locked with his, swearing she heard a soft growl from him. Oh, Midoriya. The sound of that familiar voice caused her to turn around, seeing the comforting sight of Emiya right behind her. Oh, Emiya-chan. Sorry, am I blocking your way in? Emiya shook her head. It's all good. I guess you just arrived too. And so did I. Her and Emiya heard the cheerful words of Uraraka from behind them. Who would have thought we'd all three be in the same class together? I guess we did do pretty good on the exam. Maybe that's why, Emiya said. Izumi heard another growl from Katsuki, this time when Emiya spoke. She wondered why he was reacting that way, especially since they had never interacted at the exam, as far as she knew. Maybe he was still annoyed by her presence. She chose to ignore it for the time being. Midoriya-kun, Izumi turned her attention to Ida, who had just approached her. I must say I am impressed. You perceived the true nature of the practical exam. Meanwhile, I did not. I had misjudged your abilities. She was taken aback, stepping backwards a bit before waving her hands. It wasn't like that really. I just did what any hero would have done, honest. Oh, don't say that. Ochako protested. Not after everything you did. What she said. Don't sell yourself short, Midoriya. Emiya put a hand on her shoulder, which caused her to jolt. You really did great. You saved both Uraraka and me. Izumi felt her face heating up, blushing profusely, before she covered her face in an attempt to calm it down. "Enough of the talking and get to your seats," a tired voice said. "There's time for that later." The group of 4 turned around in surprise to see a weary man in a yellow sleeping bag. It might have been funny if it hadn't also looked somewhat sad. They backed themselves up into the classroom. The man stood up straight and unzipped himself out of the sleep sack, grabbing it to his side and walking right into the room. "It took around 8 seconds for you to quiet down. Aren't very rational, are you? Time is a precious thing. It may not seem like much, but as a hero, you mustn't waste any of the time you have. Remember that," the man reprimanded. A knot tightened in Izumi's stomach. The man's words, though logical, cut sharply with a harsh tone. "I am Class 1 as homeroom teacher, Shoyuta Aizawa. Pleased to meet you," Aizawa said. "Find your assigned seats and put away your things. We won't be here for much longer." Without so much as questioning him, the class of rookie heroes took their school supplies and put it away in their desks. Izumi started searching around for her desk, before finding it near the back. Second from the last desk it seems, belonging to a black-haired girl with a ponytail. That's when she looked to her right, seeing who was sitting right in front of her. Katsuki. She looked at him for a moment, many different thoughts crossing her mind, before shaking her head and sighing. The suspense eased as she saw Emiya approaching her. "So this is where you're sitting?" Emiya asked. "It's a comfortable enough spot." "How about you?" she replied. Emiya pointed to the front row seats, specifically at the second seat closest to the classroom door. The front of the class wasn't a bad spot. However, Izumi felt a twinge of sadness because she wasn't sitting directly in front of her. Her attention was abruptly shifted when Katsuki slammed his chair against his desk, dismissing any other thoughts she had. Although he didn't show it, she sensed he was even angrier than the last time she last spoke to him. She'd been trying to suppress her feelings, but she was beginning to feel like her old self again, back in middle school. "You okay, Midoriya?" Emiya asked. It was the second time she's pulled her out of her stressed-out mental world. She felt her worries melt away as she smiled. "Yes. Thank you, Emiya-chan." She watched as Katsuki began to walk out of the classroom where everyone else was lined up, but was stopped by Aizawa. "These desks didn't cost 1 yen coins, you know. Careful how you treat school property," Aizawa said. Katsuki groaned and walked past. "Yeah, I got it." Aizawa sighed and looked to her and Emiya. "Come on, let's go." That was the first time Katsuki got warned for something. A genuine warning, not like the weak attempts from her previous teachers. Maybe the school year would be different after all. "Yes, Aizawa-sensei." Izumi panted as she quickly threw on her UA gym uniform, stumbling a little in the process. The class was required to change out of their school uniforms and into their gym uniforms, then meet Aizawa outside within 3 minutes. It was a very strict amount of time, but she was managing it. Nothing she wasn't used to this morning. After getting dressed, she made her way outside with the rest of her class, standing straight in a group as they looked to their homeroom teacher. Speaking of Aizawa, the man had already made an interesting first impression. He was definitely strict, and he also seemed rather rigid. You either did what he said or faced the consequences of your inaction sooner or later. Or at least, that was Izumi's assumption. In addition to that, there was something nagging in the back of her. The man seemed familiar somehow, like she had seen, or at least had heard of him before. Was she a hero she's heard about? Good, you're all here. On to our lesson. For our first activity, it will be something you likely already know, Aizawa said. You will all be testing your quirks in exercises you did during middle school. You will get points based on how well you do. Clear enough? She and Emiya looked at each other, feeling her excitement intensify just by her eyes, which made herself even more eager. She really wanted to test out her quirks and see if she could gain some new ones through this test. She also wanted to find out what Emiya could do. Now that she had time to think about it, she did copy Emiya's quirk at the entrance exam. Watching her create that shield during the fight with the zero-pointer flooded her mind with details of his quirk. However, she didn't have the chance to test out the functionality and abilities of the quirk, especially with a giant killer robot nearby. But from the information she has, it was a rather complex quirk. She was surprised to see how intricate it was, one that could analyze objects or weapons and examine every detail of their history to replicate them perfectly. Her eyes widened. That description closely resembled how her replication functioned. What did that mean? Is it a coincidence? How could their powers end up with similar functions, but for completely different things? This is gonna be awesome, she snapped out of her mental ramble after hearing the boy with red, spiky hair shouting. We get to go all out? Awesome, you say? Aizawa's tone went dark. You still think this is all fun and games? All right then, whoever scores the lowest across all of the activities will be expelled. There was an immediate uproar from her class. Some of them pushed back on such a decision, finding it absurd and unfair, while others tried apologizing to the teacher, appealing to him in hopes of him reconsidering. But she knew that the hero had already made his decision and was unwilling to change course. Well, there is no use in complaining like a bunch of children, she heard Ida shout. If we are to prove ourselves worthy, then we must do just that. Her attention shifted to the rest of the class to see what they thought. Some looked more hopeful, while others still seemed crushed, as if their hopes and dreams had been shattered before they could even begin. Emiya and Uraraka appeared determined, and she was glad about that. As for herself, she wasn't planning to get expelled, no matter what. After some of the other students went first, it was finally Izumi's turn to try the 50-meter dash. She knew exactly which quirk she would use. It was easy pickings, really. She turned her head to the left to see who she was racing against. As luck would have it, or in this case not, it was Katsuki. She simply shrugged and prepared herself, putting herself in a starting position. She noticed Katsuki glaring at her, his red eyes piercing her very soul, but she countered it with her own stare in an attempt to permeate his. Their eyes locked for just a moment longer. 3, 2, 1, go, Aizawa mumbled. Katsuki immediately activated Explosion and propelled himself forward. It was a smart move, but she wondered if he was even really trying. Still, after seeing Ida's performance a few moments earlier, she knew what to do. Taking a deep breath, she stretched her legs back, her eyes glowing as she activated replication. Engines began protruding from her calves before she immediately took off at incredible speeds, dashing past Katsuki completely. After a few seconds, it was all over. Aizawa had a look at the times. 3.04 seconds for Midoriya, and 4.13 seconds for Bakugo. Interesting, so she used Ida-san's quirk, the ponytail girl said. Wow. Those engines appeared out of nowhere and then vanished again, the yellow-haired boy shouted. But I recall her growing rather big, similar to Midoriya, Ida commented. Izumi wiped a small bit of sweat from her brow, and upon hearing the results, her chest felt lighter as a smile appeared on her face. Katsuki, on the other hand, was peeved, to put it mildly. He seemed to keep his composure enough to storm off the field and sit down away from everyone else. She had anticipated him going on a furious tirade, and she was relieved to find that she was wrong. She took a seat next to Uraraka and Emiya to see how the rest of their classmates performed on the test. Midoriya-kun, that was Ida-kun's quirk, wasn't it? Uraraka asked. You never did explain to me what your quirk was. Not to me either, Emiya chimed in. All right. Basically, my quirk, replication, allows me to copy other people's quirks. My main requirement is that I need a visual cue to copy the person's quirk, whether it's a flame in someone's hand or the effect caused by their ability, she explained. Once I see it, my brain is flooded with information about the quirk, including how it works, its history, and other related details. Emiya's eyes appeared to widen after she finished her explanation, but Uraraka diverted her attention, preventing further questions. That's such a good quirk, Midoriya-kun. Izumi attempted to brush off any compliments she received but couldn't hide her broad smile. A bit of time passed, and after watching one of her classmates' attempts to utilize what appeared to be a laser quirk, which failed to aid them in winning the race, Emiya was the next contestant to face the boy with the tail quirk. When Aizawa gave the signal, they went, and Emiya narrowly lost to the tailed boy, finishing with a time of 5.50 seconds. Uraraka pumped up her fists and exclaimed, That really esses. He was so close. Izumi watched as Emiya approached the two, the expression on her face she could only describe as melancholic, though she wore a small smile on her face as she walked over to them. You almost had it, Emiya-kun. Uraraka. Yeah, but I still did decent in overall time, Emiya replied. I'll do better in the next one. She said it with his usual laid-back tone, but Izumi sensed something in his manner that hinted at disappointment. However, she wouldn't push to find out, at least for now. By the way, Izumi said, does Aizawa-sensei remind you of anyone? Emiya examined Aizawa from afar, her eyes looking him up and down, before the girl just shrugged. Not to me. But did something happen? Izumi's eyes were still locked on the older man, as if to try and find some underlying secret from his appearance alone. She soon shook her head and looked back to her friends, or that's what she hoped they were. He just seems familiar is all. Maybe you've seen him somewhere else before? Uraraka suggested. You're probably right, she replied. Uraraka smirked, leaning in towards her. You're pretty analytical, aren't you, Midoriya-kun? Her cheeks turned red as she scratched the left side of her cheek. I guess you could say that. I just notice details about things other people usually don't. Emiya picked up a water bottle she had sitting right next to her. I meant to ask earlier, but I've noticed you're writing in your notebook whenever you get to see someone's quirk. Is it a hobby of yours, or does it help with your quirk? Well, yes and no. When I analyze someone's quirk, the information is already stored in my memory. But I like to keep a notebook nearby to jot down specific details or theories I come up with. It's also so I can have said information handy for someone else. Any notes about my quirk? Uraraka asked. Not yet, sorry, Izumi said sheepishly. I haven't had the time to write anything down. I don't think I've seen you use your quirk yet either. Emiya smirked, taking a sip of water. What about me? Have any notes about my quirk? Izumi's smile shone brightly. Oh, definitely. I only caught a few glimpses of it at the entrance exam, but that was enough to be able to replicate it. I saw that you created a shield to protect Uraraka-san, as well as some blades I think you had by your side. I've been wanting to ask what else you can copy, aside from weapons. For example, what objects could you? Everything blurred as she drifted into one of her many rambling sessions. Emiya and Uraraka didn't seem to mind. They sat and watched her mutter the entire time until it was time for their next exercise. Time had passed and the exercises were wrapping up. Shirou sat down, her expression blank, but inside she felt disappointed in herself. It wasn't about her performance on the quirk apprehension test, she was actually doing pretty well. She usually scored around the middle of everyone else. The problem was that she hadn't had a real chance to use her quirk. Every test and exercise barely suit the need of her quirk, besides for the ball throw really and some of the running exercises. And even then, all she did was add a bit of reinforcement to the ball, and reinforcement in her legs. She supposed that was her own fault. She had been so focused on weapons like swords and blades that she hadn't considered using other types of equipment. It was only the first day, and she believed she could bounce back from this. It did affect her quite a bit, but she understood this was just her first step into the hero world. Besides, she was confident she'd end up with a strong support group. Uraraka and Midoriya performed very well on the test, especially Midoriya. Uraraka had a few tests she nailed, particularly the ball throw, and Midoriya matched her by using the same quirk as Uraraka. That might have been the first time two students went to infinity and beyond. It was incredible to her how Midoriya was doing so well. The 50-meter dash, the grip strength test, the standing long jump, everything, she was doing fantastic. Regarding Midoriya's quirk, she was genuinely surprised. Anyone could tell it was some form of copying ability, and the expression in her eyes when she activated it felt familiar. It was a nostalgic feeling she couldn't quite place. That is, until she explained it. It was nearly identical to how his projection worked. Was it just a coincidence? She was sure they weren't related. This gave her a lot to consider. While common quirks like fire quirks exist, such a complex ability made her question everything. She allowed her jumble of thoughts settle as Midoriya came over and sat next to her. This isn't going as bad as I thought, Midoriya smiled. I thought I was going to struggle. She looked at her, perplexed. How'd that cross your mind? Your quirk is, frankly, amazing. Thank you, Emiya-chan, she said. But it's not just about copying someone's quirk and having the information. I also need to apply what I know. It's like learning a new skill. You might have the information, but applying what you know is the key part. You can still make mistakes or not put in enough effort. And that's just one example. I think I understand, she responded. What Izumi just said about not putting in enough effort. Maybe that was her problem? Perhaps she just needs to work even harder. I can tell you're being hard on yourself. Midoriya's words halted her thoughts. Her entire body froze for just a moment, before replying with a chuckle, that obvious? I've had similar thoughts before. I can read others better than I can read myself, I feel like, Izumi said. What has you down? It's just the first day, and I'm not one to give up at the first sign of trouble. But I guess, with how long I've honed my quirk, despite all its capabilities, I never realized that it can't meet all my needs, she explained. I need to work harder. If I can't be strong enough, then I'll let someone down, or worse. Her mind flashed back to that devastating fire. The sight of that all-encompassing inferno that raged fiercely, consuming everything in its path with blistering flames and thick, suffocating smoke. Just the thought of it made her chest tighten as if something cold and heavy was gripping at her heart. The intense sensation only subsided when she felt a reassuring hand gently rub along her back, grounding her back to reality. It will be okay, Midoriya reassured. You're going to get much stronger tomorrow than you are today. And if you want, I could always help you. I've got notes and everything after all. Shirou let her words linger in her head. You know, you're a pretty good pep talker, Midoriya. I do try whenever I can. Midoriya turned away blushing. But I really mean it. The girl laughed at her embarrassment, but she didn't have anything to be embarrassed about. This did remind her, however. Midoriya, what's your goal when becoming a hero? The girl whipped around to look at her, as if surprised by the question, or maybe it was the first time she was ever asked. Still, she appeared to be thinking it over before saying, It's funny, I haven't ever thought about it. Or, more accurately, it's never been a question I've had. I just want to be a hero who can save people. Shirou's eyes softened at her answer. I think that's very admirable. Thank you, Midoriya said. What about you, Emiya-chan? What kind of hero do you want to be? I want to be. That's everyone, Aizawa announced in his same bored voice. Now that you're all done the exercises, I will now announce the results. She and Midoriya got up and walked over to their ready as the rest of Class 1A gathered around, both excited and stressed enough to crush a boulder. They fixed their eyes on the screen, anticipation building, fists clenched, and with the press of a button, the results flashed on the screen. At a quick glance, Shirou found her name. She placed 10th place overall. She expected to do decent, but dead in the middle she was especially happy about. She watched as Uraraka inspected the scene a little closer. I got 11th. Uraraka cheered. I'm not too far behind you, Emiya-kun. Shirou smirked at her. Yeah, but I'll get ahead of you before that. Oh. Off to the side was a sort of odd one out in their class, the invisible girl. Shirou hadn't had time to learn her name yet, but from her tone, she could tell she was very upset. She wondered why, until she again looked at the leaderboards. At the very bottom of the list was Toru Hagakure, ranked 20th. She put 2 and 2 together, and the picture became clear to her. A pink-skinned girl came over to her, hugging her from behind. It's okay. You did as best you could have. But I could have done more. Hagakure croaked. Now I won't ever be in Udara. Oh, what I said about being expelled. That was a lie, Aizawa said bluntly. Everyone froze, including Shirou. Huh. The madman grinned widely, like he was some crazy person. It was a rational deception in the hopes of bringing out the best in all of you. Naturally, it succeeded, though some more than others. She thought she saw Aizawa glance at Bakugo. You did well. But don't become complacent. Keep growing. That revelation threw everyone for a loop, so it wasn't a surprise that everyone grew a little quiet for the moment. But only a moment. Whoa guys, Look who's at number 1. The red-haired kid said. The boy's sudden words caught Shirou's attention, as he mind was thinking the same thing. Who was at the top? When she looked further up the rankings, she saw that the number 1 spot was Midoriya. That was expected by most, but it was still an impressive achievement. The room seemed to buzz with whispers as other students took notice of the results. She felt a mix of admiration and determination grow inside her. Midoriya always seemed to give her best in whatever challenge she faced, and she was determined to do the same. Izumi, you DMN copycat. An explosive roar echoed across the field as Shirou immediately felt a surge of panic in her gut. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the blonde explosive boy make a frantic charge at Midoriya, his palms sparkling with the intent to hurt the girl. As if her body moved on its own, Shirou analyzed the structure of her legs and reinforced them with her quirk, allowing her to long jump in front of Midoriya and extend her hand out. Row Ajax! From her hand, the shield blossomed like a flower in the bright sun, shielding her, but more importantly, shielding Izumi from the boy's explosion as his hand struck the shimmering purple shield, sending up a ton of smoke from the impact. Out of my way, you DMN extra. I warned you about looking down on me, Izumi. The hell do you think you're? The orange glow from the blonde's hands suddenly vanished, and next thing Shirou knew, he was caught in white cloth, preventing any form of movement. I had a feeling you'd be the troublemaker of this class, Aizawa said low and stern, with the white cloth floating around him as his eyes glowed a deep red. If you're only going to cause trouble, you can forget about being in the hero course. Damn it. The blonde gritted his teeth. I know who you are now. Those goggles. Shirou heard Midoriya say. Upon a closer look herself, sure enough, was a pair of yellow goggles around their teacher's neck. You're the Erasure Hero, Eraser Head. Shirou's eyes widened. Eraser Head. Let me make this clear, Katsuki Bakugo, Aizawa said. Since this is your first offense, I am letting you off with a warning. However, if you persist in such childish behavior, which has already led to assault and nearly involved battery, I will not hesitate to suspend or expel you from this class. Bakugo stared daggers at the teacher for what felt like hours before reluctantly relaxing his body, signaling Aizawa to release his capture weapon and deactivate his quirk. With a sigh, Aizawa said, your documents regarding the curriculum and related materials are back in the classroom. Read them. Or don't, but I'd prefer if you did. Shirou watched as Bakugo stormed off in anger, his footsteps stomping across the lush green grass. Before she could gather all his thoughts, Aizawa suddenly appeared in front of her. Emiya, you did good. Could have been quicker, but you were quick enough. Good start. Shirou blinked. Thank you, sensei. The man hummed before walking away to the side of the building. After a couple of seconds, Shirou's mind finally caught up, and she immediately turned toward Midoriya, rushing over to her despite being only a few feet away. Are you okay? Oh, I'm fine really, Midoriya nodded. It's how he usually is. Wait, you know him? She asked. The girl's expression appeared very somber, clearly recalling something from her memory, but she still managed to smile. It's a long story. I'll explain later. Uraraka ran up quickly, worry all over her face. Are you injured at all, Midoriya-kun? No, I'm okay. Emiya-chan really saved me there. Is that just in your blood, or? Uraraka asked. She shrugged. I'm just doing what I feel is right. Besides, we're friends, aren't we? Uraraka gave a charming grin, as if it was obvious to her. Midoriya, on the other hand, looked a little stunned. It caused Shirou to worry about how she might have been treated, given what she just saw with Bakugo, but her beaming smile soon spread across her face as she giggled. Yeah, we are, Midoriya said. Shoyuta wasn't one to play favorites, or least favorites. He treated every student with the same level of fairness, even if he adjusted his approach to suit their individual needs. Anything less would be unacceptable, especially in a time when discrimination against quirkless people and heteromorphs continued to worsen. However, he would judge some of them based on their background when relevant. Shirou Emiya seemed fine enough on her own, a kid with loads of potential, scored excellently on the entrance exam, and even if she did a moderate job overall on the quirk apprehension test, Her quick thinking to protect Midoriya against Bakugo's childish outburst was quite commendable. The problem he faced was that her last name was Emiya, which meant she was somehow related to someone he's suspected of for a while now, Kiritsugu Emiya. They've been hunting the villain killer for quite some time, not as long as the hero killer, but still a significant PRD. His work seemed to slow down roughly 5 to 6 years ago, which coincidentally is when Kiritsugu adopted Shirou. Of course, that was never his only reason to suspect him. Every time Alter would strike, Kiritsugu would always happen to be nearby after each incident. However, there has never been any solid evidence linking him to any specific crime or event. The closest they came was the incident 6 years ago when all of Fuyuki was burned to the ground. They never figured out how it happened, but once again, Kiritsugu was somehow present before anyone else. But that still wasn't enough, and in addition to his insistence on adopting Shirou, the police were even willing to let the suspicion slide. The girl had nowhere else to go after all. But regardless, he was going to treat Shirou as her own person, not based on what her father could be. He sighed as he continued walking alongside the building, finally spotting the person he intended to find. "Aizawa, you big liar!" All Might shouted. "That was no deception, you expelled an entire class of first years once before." "Yeah. So what?" he replied. "It means that this class changed your mind." "Mind telling me how?" "They all show promise. I don't believe in wasting potential. But more importantly, why were you watching the test? Do you have an eye for one of my students?" All Might hacked, coughing profusely. "You could say that. I simply took interest in Midoriya Shoujo because of how she scored." He squinted at the number 1 hero. "I see. Just don't play favorites." "Of course. She is quite interesting," he admitted. "Even before I revealed myself, it seemed like she already had an idea of who I was. She definitely has great potential." All Might kept his signature smirk. What was that about playing favorites? He scoffed and started walking away. "I don't play favorites. I am just stating what I consider the facts." After several more steps, the man was finally alone again with his thoughts. The end of the day arrived like clockwork. The rest of the day felt like the usual for Shoyuta. Well, except for one thing. He did something he hadn't done in a while: watched his students leave the school for the day. He'd usually do this if he was worried something might happen, like if a major villain was on the loose. All Might's presence put a stop to those kinds of worries, so he did it less and less. He couldn't understand why, but something compelled him to make sure everyone left UA safely. Or maybe he was just curious, he really couldn't tell you. "Midoriya-kun. Able to match my speed like that? Impressive." He heard the familiar sound of the younger brother of Ingenium. "You gonna let her match you like that, Ida-kun?" Uraraka asked. "Nonsense," Ida replied. "Although I must say, Aizawa-sensei certainly fooled us. To think he'd use such a deception to force us to improve like that. Such tactics. Hardly a surprise in retrospect. It seems like the kind of thing he'd do," Emiya commented. "I'm just surprised my gut was right." "He's a racerhead," Midoriya chirped. "Oh, I wish I could have gotten his autograph." Shoyuta watched as the 4 students, now seemingly friends with one another, walked together toward the exit of UA. He couldn't help but smirk. Okay, maybe this year wasn't going to be a total pain in the butt. Tashinori sighed, settling into a comfortable chair, his slender, lanky frame relaxing in the cozy and welcoming atmosphere that was Nedzu's office. He was feeling exhausted, to put it lightly. It was no surprise, with him being the symbol of peace and all, saving as many civilians as possible and maintaining that sense of peace was what he signed up for, and he wouldn't have traded that time for anything. Not to mention the chance he's been given to work at UA, the school that allowed him to be the hero he is today. The school year had just begun as well, and he was determined to give it his all. But on top of all that, along with his injury from his battle many years ago, things were beginning to pile up quickly. He had been unable to sustain his all-might form for more than 3 hours a day, and that was being generous. He was feeling himself tire more easily by the day, running on fumes, and eventually that spark was going to fade. He needed to find a successor. This was why he was here now in Nedzu's chambers, his sight gradually dimming as the boredom of waiting for the principal started to wear him down. Am I a mouse? A dog? A bear? Nezu suddenly appeared out of nowhere, causing Toshinori to cough up blood. I see you're awake. Apologies for the delay, Yagi. Toshinori cleared his throat, letting out a nervous laugh. It's not a problem. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. Nezu made his way to his chair, sat down, and faced him with a confident grin. I can assume what it is you want to discuss, so let's cut right to the chase, shall we? Toshinori nodded. Right. It's about finding a new successor for One for All. I was wondering if there was someone you had in mind. Nezu hummed as he stared Toshinori down. I'm sure you and I are thinking of the exact same candidate, but before that, I must ask, did you not consider Sasaki's proposal of Mirio Togata? I did and still am. The boy has amazing potential, there's no doubt. He has a strong will, and his performance has been phenomenal. But you see something more in Izumi Midoriya? That's correct. Toshinori's eyes drifted to the window in Nezu's office, looking out at the sky above. I actually met Midoriya Shoujo once before, about a year ago. That sludge villain had taken her hostage, but I was able to free her. I caught the villain, and everything was fine. However, she asked me something that resonated with me. Can someone with a quirk like mine be considered a real hero? His face lit up with a radiant smile. It reminded me of my own youth. That push, that aspiration to be a hero, despite that lingering doubt within yourself. For me, it was my quirkishness. For her, it was her own quirk. We seem like complete opposites, yet I feel we might have similar origins. I want to do what my master did for me. Nezu looked at him with a slightly amused smile. Is that all, Yagi? The similarity between you two? Not only that. Her performance on both the entrance exam and the apprehension test shows she has the intelligence and skill to effectively use One for All. Aizawa himself even recognizes her potential, and that's rare for someone like him. And you do too, don't you? Nezu chuckled. Of course. I've had my eye on Midoriya-san, as well as Emiya-san, since the entrance exam. The two have certainly piqued my interest. Emiya Shoujo, don't you think Aizawa will be too hard on her? Given the suspicions surrounding her father. Worry not. Aizawa may be strict, but he judges the students on their own merits. Kiritsugu Emiya is a separate subject altogether. Toshinori nodded. I see. That was all I wanted to discuss. Thank you for your time, Nezu. He got up from his seat, bowed to his superior, and walked towards the door. One more thing, Nezu said. You're finally choosing your successor, so let me ask again. Are you sure he is dead? Toshinori fell silent, that minute of silence feeling like an eternity. Yes. I'm sure. I see, Nezu replied. That's all I needed. With those parting words, he left Nezu's office feeling a heavy weight on his chest. He wasn't entirely lying. He was quite certain that the demon lord, All for One, was dead. He recalled it so vividly being pushed to his limits, with his stomach torn open, feeling himself on the brink of death. And with every ounce of his strength, he had slammed his fist into the man's skull, certain that he ended his life. The large pool of blood that came with it brought both relief and distress to his nerves. He never wanted to be forced to take a life again after that incident. However, rumors had circulated, albeit small ones, about someone lurking in the shadows, orchestrating smaller crimes into a larger scheme. Yet he dismissed them. Such rumors surface almost biennially. A supposed new underground crime boss becomes just another gang of ambitious crooks lacking the backing to follow through. Nevertheless, whoever his successor ends up being, they shouldn't have to bear the burden that came with One for All. Shirou's eyes followed the patterns of light and shadow dancing across the city streets, with the sun casting a golden glow on the busy roads. She was no stranger to waking up early in the morning, as she had a routine of doing so to train her projection skills. Work harder as you can, is what she always told herself. But whether it was due to underlying stress or the activities themselves during her first day at Udata yesterday, she was feeling more tired than usual. Her gaze shifted to inside the car. In the front seat of the car was her father, driving her to school just like the day before. Next to the man was their trusted bodyguard, Artoria, whose hands rested in her lap and her gaze was fixed on the road, as if watching for any potential danger. Artoria was a kind-hearted woman, and by her own admission, rather attractive too. From her short blonde hair that appeared to shimmer in the sunlight, by the way she styled it in a ponytail, to the black suit she wore, she was quite a sight. She had a scent of irises about her, probably because she occasionally helped Irisville plant them. The aroma was gentle and floral, capable of calming your body and making you drift into daydreams. While others might perceive her as stoic, beneath her composed exterior, she genuinely cared for the Emiya family. Her affection for Ilya and her mother was especially apparent. She seemed indifferent to Kiritsugu, but didn't hate him. That being said, she didn't understand why they needed a bodyguard. She initially thought it was because of her father's vigilante past, fearing someone might target him and his family if exposed. It made sense. Artoria appeared to have stayed at the Emiya residence longer than Shirou did, as she was there when Shirou was welcomed into the home with open arms. However, Artoria didn't look much older than she did, yet she's seen the blonde girl drive. She had never heard of a 15-year-old who could operate a car, let alone one who was hired to be a family's bodyguard. Not to mention that her last name is the same as one of the most famous kings in mythology. In summary, Artoria had some oddities to her, but Shirou was glad to have her. The thought was quickly brushed aside when they finally pulled up to the towering building that was UA High School. "Do you require me to escort you to the school, Shirou?" Artoria asked, her tone as profound as ever. Shirou shook her head. "I'm okay. But thank you, Artoria." She tilted her head when she spotted a small pout form on Artoria's lips, but she soon hid it away before Shirou could comment on it. "Make sure you take care, Shirou," Kiritsugu said. She shot a smirk. "Don't worry, old man. I won't do anything reckless." She could hear her father chuckle as she grabbed the cool handle of the car door, feeling the radiating sun and the brisk spring weather, the warm breeze on her face, and the wind brushing through her hair. Taking a deep breath, Shirou steeled herself as she took a step inside the academy. The day went pretty much as she expected, which is to say, she had no idea what to expect. The first classes started off normal enough. The room bustled with the shouts of her fellow hero classmates, the high of becoming a hero still on everyone's mind. Midoriya was quieter than everyone else, but that was because she was intensely concentrated on writing in her notebook. These ambitions were on Shirou's mind too, of course, but she was cautious nevertheless. Yesterday proved their homeroom teacher was not against threatening expulsion from the hero course to push them forward. Even if she didn't mean it at the time, what would happen in the future? Speaking of their teacher, Aizawa practically dragged himself into the classroom, which Shirou assumed was the usual, and quickly silenced every student within his domain. 5 seconds was better, but not optimal. "Do better next time," Aizawa said. From behind, Shirou heard Kaminari whisper, "How is that not good enough?" "I don't think complaining will make Aizawa-sensei happy," she whispered back. Luckily, Aizawa didn't start the class with a surprise practical test that time. Instead, he began teaching like in any other school. Shirou did suppose it was still high school, even if primarily devoted to heroics, so it would have been strange not to learn any of the basic subjects. Naturally, he still cited heroics in his teachings, but in a much less physical way. He handed the class textbooks about subjects regarding the laws of heroics and the basic steps of being a hero on duty, the latter of which was their main study for their first test. Needless to say, it was an interesting, albeit slightly tiring morning. The man was as rigid as a steel pole. The day went on, time passed, different teachers came in and out to teach their subjects. More relaxed than Aizawa, although present Mike was arguably a bit too bombastic, and that was putting it lightly. Soon, lunch came around the corner, which was quite comforting for Shirou. And not because of the savory smell of lunch rush's meals lingering in the cafeteria, but that she had friends to sit and eat with. Even before her new life with the Emiya family, she had never had many friends. She did what she could to help others regardless of whether they were her age or not with all sorts of problems, but she never formed a true friendship. That was until she met Midoriya, along with Uraraka and Ida. The three had a table set up for themselves, and Midoriya was the one to approach and invite her to join them. With her gleaming emerald eyes and bright smile that could light up the room, who was she to say no? She was glad she did. She listened to Midoriya's rambling about the material they went over in class, which was to be expected, given her analytical nature. Her smarts were rivaled by one of their other classmates. Yaoyorozu was her name, if she recalled correctly. Uraraka and Ida shared a bit about their home lives, with the former mentioning her parents' work in construction, something she seemed a little hesitant to bring up, and the latter describing his relationship with his brother, the famous Ingenium. The two sounded like they shared a strong bond, and from the way he spoke with such enthusiasm, his voice loud and proud, it was obvious he deeply admired his brother. Shirou could relate, thinking of her own beloved sibling. Unfortunately, the chatting and joking around was soon cut off by the sound of the next bell. The day hadn't been as exciting as she expected, which she was okay with, but she also knew that eventually they'd need more experience to become better heroes. She walked through the hallways, hearing students from other classes rushing to their rooms just like her. She felt a few accidental shoves from some of them, with many of them turning to apologize as they continued forward, but she felt one rough, deliberate shove from the ever-so-friendly Katsuki Bakugo. She still needed to ask Midoriya what was up with this guy. His personality reflected his quirk, an explosion, ready to go off at a moment's notice. Shirou found her seat and sat down, not before giving Bakugo the stink eye as she did. The blonde boy remained silent as he also took his seat. Midoriya must have noticed this, because she approached her almost immediately. "Did he say something to you?" she asked, her tone laced with concern. "No, but he shoved me in the hall." "It's fine, it doesn't upset me, but he sure has an attitude." "I'm so sorry, Emiya-chan. I'll talk to him and make sure that he doesn't bother me," she finished, watching as Midoriya's eyes widened ever so slightly. "It's not your problem to fix. If he comes at me, I can handle it myself." She frowned slightly at how uncomfortable Midoriya looked. "Biba." She started to speak before Aizawa walked through the door, which was everyone's cue to sit down and be quiet. She watched as Midoriya made her way to her desk. "You're all quiet. Right now is your afternoon class, who will be led by me. Because I am here, coming through the door like normal." Shirou's eyes widened in astonishment as the door burst open with a powerful yet graceful force. Standing in the doorway was none other than All Might, the symbol of peace, his enormous figure towering over everyone in the room, bringing a sense of relief and joy to many, including Shirou herself. Her eyes immediately darted toward Midoriya, who looked like she was about to shoot up into the air like a rocket. "To be a hero, you must know the basics," All Might announced. "Not just mentally but physically too. Which is why it is time for battle training." Shirou's body tensed as those words echoed in her mind. The art of combat, something she'd prepared for long before arriving at Udare, been taught by her own father no less. There was no room for mistakes now. She would have to push herself to the limit. "Without further ado, grab your hero costumes and meet me at the training grounds." Izumi took a deep breath as she cautiously stepped down the dimly lit hallway, her eyes fixed on the bright white light that beckoned to her at the end of the corridor. She wasn't exactly running late, but she was probably among the last in her class to emerge into the main area, where everyone else was all ready and waiting. Honestly, it was her very first time slipping into her new hero costume, and the sensation was incredible, feeling the fabric snugly fit around her, making her feel more like a real hero with every second she wore it. Initially, she planned to have her mom make the suit, but her mom insisted that the experts at UA take charge of the design. After all, she just wanted her little girl to be as safe as possible. Izumi felt guilty, especially since her mom was actually pretty good at sewing, and deep down, she did want her mom to make her first hero costume. Still, logically, having UA make it was undeniably the safest and smartest choice. Regardless, she focused on what lay ahead, her first genuine battle. Was she nervous? Absolutely. Anyone in her position would have been. Yet she refused to let that uneasiness hold her back. The light intensified as she neared, making her way through the corridor and getting a glimpse at her classmates as her vision adjusted. were all adorned in their hero costumes, eccentric, extraordinary, and occasionally a little outlandish. Or perhaps, non-existent, in Hagakure's case. As she approached, she caught sight of Ida and Uraraka waving cheerfully at her, smiles bright on their faces. Well, Uraraka's at least, since Ida was wearing the signature Ingenium helmet, no facial features to speak of. Speaking of which, his costume bore a striking resemblance to his brother's, with a few curious differences she couldn't wait to ask about. Uraraka's costume was definitely charming. Izumi thought it might be a little tight, but the vibrant colors and the all-around space look made it incredibly endearing and eye-catching. As for her own costume, it was rather straightforward in terms of design. A vibrant light green full-body jumpsuit with a bold red belt cinched at the waist, sleek black elbow and knee pads added a touch of practicality, while elegant white gloves complemented her look. All of these components blended nicely with her hood, which admittedly had a striking resemblance to All Might's iconic 2 tufts of hair. It was simplistic and maybe a little plain, but she didn't care. It all came together into something that truly represented her. The materials used for her suit were a different story. The advantage of having UA's professionals craft it was that they could utilize materials her mother likely couldn't, or at least not in such large quantities. The fabric was made of carbon fibers that wrapped around her figure like a barrier, shielding her from knives, blunt attacks, and heat, offering flexibility. She appreciated its heat resistance, since if she were to ever use a fire-type quirks, she needed a costume that wasn't so flammable. Even during the entrance exam, she had to be careful not to ignite her tracksuit, despite its durability. "Your costume looks so cute, Midoriya-kun," Uraraka exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with admiration, causing Izumi to blush softly. While it does strike me as minimalistic, you make it shine in its own way," Ida commented, Izumi wondering whether or not that was a compliment. She gently rubbed her arm, a shy smile forming. "Thank you both. I've been designing it since I was little." "I didn't take you for an artist, Midoriya." Izumi turned toward the sound of the voice, recognizing it immediately as Shirou's, and her face instantly turned red. She wore body armor consisting of a tight, sleeveless black shirt with silver accents that emphasized her muscles. Her armor also included a metal plate on the collar, black pants with 2 straps on each thigh, and black metal-plated shoes that seemed to be attached to his trousers. That was it. No coat, tunic, anything, just this armor that really showcased how much she worked out. Hell, the sleeveless armor let her see exactly how much muscle she had in her arms. Emiya grinned. "Maybe I should have you design a suit for me." "Mihin," she blurted out, her cheeks feeling hotter. It's not like I'm an artist or anything. I just like to doodle sometimes. It's amateur work, really, just a hobby. I enjoy putting pencil to paper and seeing what I can come up with, but I don't have any formal training or..." She kept rambling as her face flashed various shades of red. Shirou leaned forward with a tilted head and knitted brows, causing her to blush even more. Uraraka whispered to Ida, "Is Midoriya-kun okay?" Perhaps her costume isn't properly insulated." Ida guessed. "Attention everyone!" The sound of All Might's voice boomed throughout the area, drawing everyone's attention to him. "We are about to start the battle training. But before we begin, let me introduce some new faces." Izumi tilted her head to the side, her eyes scanning down a different corridor. She couldn't see anyone, but the sound of footsteps reverberating through the hall as they drew closer. Shadows parted just enough to reveal the newcomers, and Izumi had to resist the urge to geek out. Emerging from the shadows, towering at 6'4.5" clad in a striking red skin-tight suit that accentuated his athletic build, was the well-known blood hero, Vlad King. His usual stern expression was in place, but his presence was welcome. That's when she caught sight of the other individuals, the students of Vlad King. It was a great deal to take in, fresh faces she hadn't seen before, and besides wanting to get to know the group of fellow future heroes, she was already eyeing their physical features to see what could key her into their quirks. Luckily for her, some of their costumes gave her some ideas. A short brunette wore a red dress, white dots patterned throughout, the reminiscent design of a mushroom, the long, graceful green vines of hair of another girl who, in Izumi's own words, looked divine, her outfit solely a white robe, and the one who seemed to stand above the rest, a boy with blonde hair with a striking black tuxedo, wearing a smirk that could either be described as one of confidence or delusion. She wasn't sure which one. They stopped just a few feet from Izumi and her class. Vlad King gave a courteous bow as his students quickly followed suit. "Who are they?" Emiya asked, eyebrow raised. Before Izumi could conjure up a reply, All Might gave the answer for them. "Class 1B, All Might replied. They will be both your teammates and your opponents for today's exercise." "The same goes for you all," Vlad King said, directed at his class. "Getting to know your own class is one thing, but another class, one who you'll also be in the field with, is just as important. Remember, this is no game." The students of Class 1B nodded in agreement, except for one. Out of the corner of Izumi's eye, she noticed the eccentric blonde from before, seeming to watch her class intently. She wasn't sure why. Perhaps he was simply curious about what they could do. All Might cleared his throat. "As Kan-sensei said, this training is meant to prepare you for what will undoubtedly be very serious situations. Of course, mistakes will happen as part of the learning process, but it's crucial to recognize the potential consequences of those mistakes and to learn from them. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Great to hear it. Now let's do our best. Plus ultra. Plus ultra." For a brief PRD, maybe around 5 minutes, the two classes exchanged looks and even some words to one another. Izumi noticed that the mushroom girl from before showed a peculiar interest in the dark and mysterious Tokoyami from her class. She could hear Kaminari's ridiculous attempt at flirting as she looked to see him trying to hit on the vine-haired girl, but he was quickly rejected as she wrapped her hair around him and tossed him aside. Probably deserved, to be fair. Ida and Emiya seemed to be talking to some of the other classmates she hadn't noticed yet, a girl with short orange hair, a girl with long green hair and sharp-pointed teeth, and a short boy with a device on his face. Just then, Izumi sensed something, like someone's eyes were on her. She looked around the room and noticed a different member of Class 1B watching her intently. At first, she thought she saw a ghost, but it was just a normal girl. Well, normalish. Her hair was a kind of gray pale silver, might have been more accurate, a patch of it covering the left side of her face, leaving one blue eye visible that complemented the light blue kimono she wore. A black mask covered her face, so it was hard to tell what kind of expression she was making, but even with that obscurity, there was almost a look of intrigue she could pick up on. Before she could approach, All Might's voice boomed through the area once again. "Thank you for waiting. Now here's the deal. The villain team will be hiding a nuclear weapon in the hideout, and the hero team have to go and take care of it. To decide the pairs," Vlad King adds on, "you will be drawing lots out of 2 buckets. One for Class 1A, and one for Class 1B. "What's the purpose of that?" asked Shirou. "The reason for that is to help both classes get to know each other better," he replied. "Now, any questions before we continue?" A few students raised their hands, and both teachers took turns giving their answers. There is a set time limit on the exercise, 15 minutes. It doesn't seem like much, which she guessed was intentional, much like a timer for an explosive. They explained other rules, such as how any unnecessary level of violence was strictly prohibited, which she obviously knew, but she wasn't entirely sure about the explosive blonde in her class. He tended to get overboard when not kept in check, which was most of the time. With that settled, "Please draw from this box," All Might exclaimed. One after another, each person took a piece of paper from the bin. Izumi grabbed one and, after everyone else received theirs, stared at the paper. Right there was a large letter in bright red font. "I wonder who. You have the letter A as well?" "Whoa!" A small whisper came from behind Izumi, causing her to almost launch into the air like a rocket. However, it was just the girl from before, and her hands was a similar piece of paper to Izumi's, one also printed with the letter A on it. "Why, you're my teammate then. It's nice to meet you. My name is Izumi Midoriya," she said, catching her breath. The two bowing to each other, the gray-haired girl replying, "Reiko Yanagi. You seem spooky. I can feel an aura coming off of you." "Spooky aura. I like spooky things." Thank you? Izumi wasn't sure whether that was meant as an insult or a compliment. However, given the small change in her eyelids that resembled a smile, she took it as a compliment. Soon, the additional groups were decided. She saw Emiya approach a boy with gray hair, who looked similar to one of her classmates, Kirishima. At that moment, she felt a spark ignite inside her. It might have been the realization that this was her first battle in her hero training or a desire to grow stronger and improve, but it burned brighter than ever. She wanted to do good. Not just good, she wanted to surpass everyone's expectations. Now, let us see what the first round has in store. All Might said as he walked over to 2 bins and grabbed 1 ball from each. A from the hero bin and G from the villain bin. So we're the heroes, Yanagi muttered. Izumi pondered for a moment. The villains, however. Taking a quick look around, she tried to identify who had which letter. Luckily, it wouldn't take long to find out, as the blonde boy from earlier was walking toward her with, to her surprise, Uraraka right beside him. So you must be Midoriya, he exclaimed, which made her jump a little. Midoriya-kun. Uraraka said. I guess we'll be up against each other. She smiled at her classmate. Uraraka-san and? A smirk was plastered upon the boy's face. Nito Minoma. I've heard a little about you from your friend here. Something felt off. She didn't know what it was, but there was almost a resentment to the way he spoke. I was kind of rambling, Uraraka admitted, scratching the back of her head. I didn't know we'd be facing each other. What was it again? That your quirk replicates the quirks of others. Minoma almost seemed to tower over Izumi, but she shook her head and answered. Yes, that's correct. A small chuckle escaped the boy's lips. I had a feeling that just from seeing you, you're not main character material. Main character? She stammered, feeling like her throat was clogged. Ochako looked nervous. Hey, Minoma-kun, that's not. Truly. Someone like you with your type of quirk? You'd fit more as a side character. Minoma exclaimed. There he goes again, Yanagi commented. Isn't that hypocritical? You shouldn't talk back to your own classmate, Yanagi, Minoma grumbled. Izumi's eyebrow furrowed at his death glare towards Yanagi. Who are you to even decide that? To decide? Minoma let out an annoying laugh, the kind that makes you feel small and insignificant just from hearing it. That's not for me to decide. It's simply how it is. For people like you, with a quirk that completely copies others' abilities, you'll be on the sidelines alongside the side characters. Uraraka looked stunned, clearly never intending for the conversation to veer this direction. Yanagi seemed less surprised, but still a little annoyed. But Izumi? She felt her chest tighten slightly, a familiar sensation from her middle school years when Katsuki would berate her. The things Minoma was saying felt all too similar to back then. However, she took a deep breath and kept her full attention on him. What do you know about me and my quirk? She asked earnestly. Minoma's smile gradually vanished as he turned away from her. I know exactly what you're about. Izumi Midoriya. With those ominous words lingering in the air, he signaled to Uraraka and started to walk away. Uraraka gave Izumi a brief frown before she followed, leaving her and Yanagi in silence. She promised herself that things like that wouldn't bother her anymore, that she would move past them. Yet here she was, her heartbeat pounding loudly in her chest, while the noise of the world around her faded away as she got lost inside her own mind, like she was navigating a harrowing maze of emotions and swirling thoughts. It took her a moment to feel the tapping of someone's finger on her shoulder. She saw it was Yanagi, who was gesturing to her right, and when she turned, she saw that Emiya had come up to her. When did she approach? Midoriya, are you okay? Emiya asked. She tried catching her breath. Yeah, I'm okay. Just a lot on my mind suddenly. Her eyes naturally looked away and down at the floor. Something in her told her not to look at Emiya. She didn't know why. Did she feel embarrassed in a moment of weakness? Her heart was still thumping like a marching band, and she desperately wanted it to stop. And then it did. Let's get your mind off it then. Whoever does the best at the trial wins. Simple as that. She looked to Emiya, who had a neutral expression on her face. Huh. A competition, I guess you could call it. My mother always tries to win me and my sister's affection from our dad, kind of as a game. And I thought, well, if we're supposed to be heroes, we should try to push each other to do better, right? Emiya extended her arm confidently, her hand forming a fist. Izumi unconsciously studied Emiya's knuckles and the gaps between her fingers, without any understanding as to why. But she responded with a soft smile, bumping fists in acknowledgement. If that's the case, I accept your challenge, Emiya-chan. Don't hold back on me. Emiya smiled. Make sure to do the same. Izumi looked to Yanagi, determined. Sorry about that, Yanagi-san. Are you ready? The ghostly girl simply nodded and walked with her to their designated area. Is here good? Uraraka. Nito was inattentive to his surroundings, as everything seemed to fade into the background, failing to attract his attention. He hadn't truly been paying attention for quite some time since that introduction with Midoriya. When he heard Uraraka's voice, he finally snapped back to reality and focused his gaze on her. Right there should be great, he finally replied. The bomb, but not really, was slowly lowered to the ground as Uraraka chanted, "Release," to disable her quirk. Her quirk was definitely impressive. He could think of some very obvious uses for it, like in rescue operations. Stopping falling debris, helping lift other heroes to higher places, and so on. There could be some combat uses too, and since rescues are part of hero work, he could see it being main character worthy. Which Midoriya wasn't. But the way he heard Uraraka talk about her? It's as if she was the main character. Apparently at the quirk apprehension test, she was oh so amazing, incredible, the most outstanding performance you could ever see. And after learning what her quirk was? It made him boil, even trying to shield that heat away with his usual eccentric demeanor. What was she doing that he wasn't? What made her so special? What did she have over him? No matter what, he was going to see how much of a side character she was. He was going to prove how he deserved to be seen as someone capable of being a great hero. Minoma-kun. The soft sound of Uraraka's voice snapped him out of his seething frenzy. Pious. Uraraka-san, what is it? He asked. Uraraka smiled brightly. Well, a plan. We totally need a plan of action, right? What ya got? Minoma took a moment to think. They had plenty of time before the heroes had to enter the building. With the quirks he stocked up on before the trial, he had a solid plan in mind. It wasn't foolproof, but it would give him the element of surprise. I have an idea, but you'll stay here. He saw the confusion creep upon her face, but he simply turned away. Stay here and guard the bomb, in case one of those meddling heroes decide to drop in and ruin everything. But shouldn't we stick together? Work as a team? Uraraka argued. Nito sighed. Not in this situation. They could split up by the time I encounter one of them. You'll need to hold the fort here in case of that possibility. I suppose so. You'll do fine. Just apprehend them, keep the bomb untouched, and you'll be fine. With that, he quickly left the room. If his hunch was correct, this building should hold something very important to his plan. No one should question it, at least initially. And when he meets Midoriya, that just means he can prove himself against her. Wearing a masked grin, he moved deeper into the building to put his plan into action. Izumi wasn't sure what to expect when she entered the building, but it definitely looked like the kind of place a villain would hide out in, even though it was surprisingly clean and polished. She supposed that those at UA were very meticulous in ensuring their equipment appeared as good as possible. Yanagi stood beside her as they checked their dimmed surroundings, peeping their heads cautiously around every shadowy corner in case one of the two villains decided to attempt an ambush. Once they were in the clear, the two immediately got to work. First, we should establish what we each can do. Minoma-kun already simplified it, but my quirk, replication, lets me utilize quirks I've seen being used, so I have plenty of versatility. What about you, Yanagi-san? Yanagi nodded and replied, my quirk is poltergeist. It lets me telekinetically control objects or people close by. Spooky, right? Her eyes brightened with amazement as Yanagi explained her ability, putting her hand to her chin to think. Fascinating. Your quirk will give us an edge over Uraraka-san's abilities, since I theorize she'll require some setup to make use of her quirk fully. What about weaknesses? The limit of things I can control are those with the weight of a single person. If I had to be more specific, around 62 kilograms. That's good to know. Izumi took a moment to process everything, ignoring any weird clattering noises of the building. With the quirks she currently has available and what Yanagi is capable of, she should be able to come up with something. But there was one last loose end she needed to gather more information on. Yanagi-san, earlier you said something to Monoma-kun. That he was being a hypocrite while he went on about my quirk. What did you mean by that? Does it have to do with his quirk? Yanagi looked a little surprised, but simply answered the question. His behavior confused me. After the opening ceremony, we had a test for our quirks. While I don't know all the details, he has a quirk like yours. He can copy other people's quirks. Ah, I believe that's enough out of you, Yanagi. The two girls felt a chill run down their spines at the sound of Monoma's voice, frantically scanning their surroundings for any sign of the boy. Izumi tried to keep her breathing steady and thought to herself, where could Monoma be? How was he nearby but also out of sight? Just then she sensed something. Not physically, but a presence right behind her, pressed against the wall. Were her nerves just on edge, or was her body subconsciously alerting her? If only it weren't so dark, not even the windows helped. The dark? She immediately looked up. The lights were off. Just out the corner of Izumi's eye, she could catch someone emerging from the darkness. Yanagi-san. Away from the wall. Yanagi nearly hesitated, but in a rush of adrenaline she tore herself away from the wall. Suddenly she felt another hand grab hers before she pulled her hand free from their attacker in a tense panic. Coming out of the inky blackness was who they had both thought. Nito Monoma, turning from his Stygian transformation into his usual eccentric self. Izumi's eyes flared as she scanned two quirks. Was that right? You really shouldn't let your guard down, you so-called heroes, Monoma mocked, a sly grin on his face. Izumi couldn't tell if he was playing up the act, or really meant that. This isn't good, Yanagi said anxiously. A bead of sweat went down Izumi's face. He touched your hand, that means... Without any explanation, Monoma threw some watches he kept as part of his hero costume into the air, as he activated another one of his quirks. She looked upon the watches, now floating in midair, surrounded by a light purple glow, and yet another indication that allowed her to copy the quirk. This was Yanagi's poltergeist, without a doubt. With a swift movement of Monoma's arms, which she assumed was him being performative, the watches zoomed across the wall and against the windows, the force causing the glass to shatter into many pieces and allowing the outside light to completely shine through. Her eyes suddenly shot wide open. Has the realization hit you yet? Monoma said, another smug smile on his face, as the clear fragments soon flew around the hallway like a colony of bees. Get behind me, Yanagi-san. She immediately jumped into action, getting in front of her teammate and activating the quirk of a certain red-haired manly classmate. Hardening. The skin of her arm hardened like rock, as multiple glass shards smashed into even tinier pieces upon striking her. You're seriously persistent, Midoriya? Monoma yelled. Yanagi burst out of hiding, confronting the shards head-on as her hands moved with grace, creating some sort of gesture. The purple glow from the fractured pieces intensified, doubling in brightness as the pieces were completely still. Both Yanagi and Monoma struggled to get a leg up over the other, the shards moving inches closer or farther from Izumi and Yanagi. However, by how Yanagi seemed to sweat, her counterattack wasn't going to hold up forever. Izumi quickly considered her options, her mind racing for a solution. What could she do? What did she have at her disposal? Monoma shouldn't be a problem for her to handle, but she needed to focus on protecting Yanagi. More than that, they didn't even know where Uraraka and the bomb were located. But with that last thought, an idea sparked within her. She chose to activate another of her quirks, manifesting Jiro's earphone jack. In an instant, headphone cables extended from her ears, ready to be used. She quickly glanced at the standstill in front of her, more importantly, scanning the glass shards in the air. After doing so, She inserts one of the jacks into the wall, feeling for any vibrations or sudden sounds in the area. Her heart pounding, she kept searching higher through the floors, until she finally caught the sound of a sneeze. The very top floor. That's where she was. With another quick thought, she focused her mind. After acquiring this quirk, she didn't have much time to think of anything practical, but this should work just fine. Taking off one of her gloves, something emerged from the skin of her hand. A baseball. Creation, plus, a green energy encapsulated the object. Projection's ability to reinforce objects. Monoma-kun. Catch. She positioned herself, stomping her foot hard on the concrete floor as she reeled her arm back as far as she could before hurling it toward the blonde boy. Monoma gasped as he tried to divert attention to catch the ball midair with Poltergeist, but it was too late and too fast, hitting him right in the stomach and causing him to fly back and the shards to fall to the ground. Izumi deactivated all the quirks she was using and focused on Yanagi, who took a moment to collect herself. Yanagi-san, I found where Uraraka-san is. She's on the top floor. You need to get up there and subdue her, or retrieve the bomb. We don't have a lot of time. The ghostly girl nodded. Understood. What about you? I'll take care of Monoma-kun. I feel that's what he wanted, a way to distract us. It's better if we split up and handle our opponents evenly. Got it? Oh, and take these. Izumi took off her gloves and handed them to Yanagi. Put these on. Yanagi looked puzzled, but she did. Izumi then closed her eyes and used projection to create many shards of glass in her bare hands, thankfully keeping them flat so they didn't pierce her skin. She carefully dropped the shards into Yanagi's now gloved hands. You're going to need these. I don't know if the rooms here have anything for you to use, so it's better to be safe than sorry. Thank you. Be careful, Yanagi says before heading her way towards the stairs. However, she turns to Izumi and said, You got this, Midoriya-san. Izumi returned her kindness with a warm smile, watching her depart with a lingering gaze before turning her focus to Monoma, the boy rising back up the ground, wiping debris off his face. They both stared at each other intently, with Izumi especially noticing how battered part of his costume looked. She worried she might have hit the baseball too hard. It was a spontaneous choice that was probably not practical in an actual hero scenario, but a girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. Haha. Unexpectedly, Monoma released an extraordinarily loud and creepy laugh, startling Izumi ever so slightly. It was hard to see, but by the intensity in his eyes, you could tell he had gone mad. He stepped forward towards her, as he seemed to prepare yet another quirk. I won't let you steal my spotlight, Midoriya. Ochako paced back and forth across the room. Even though the building was well maintained, a smell of concrete lingered in the air. In some ways, it reminded her of the times she spent on her parents' construction sites, doing what she could to help them. She still hoped she could do more for them, trying to be a hero and all. So why wasn't she doing more right now? She recalled what Monoma said to her before he left. Stay here and guard the bomb in case those meddling heroes decide to drop in and ruin everything. She was playing the role of a dastardly villain, yes. But in this position? She wasn't doing much of anything, much less committing evil deeds to stop the heroes from reaching their goal. She supposed that some crooks out there had this role to play, and being in their position made her feel worse for them than anything. Then again, being in the position of a villain helps her get into their state of mind, so it wasn't all for nothing. But she could be doing more. She needed to do more. She sighed, eyeing the door with a stare that could bore anyone to death. Monoma-kun, what are you doing? As if to be answered, the faint sound of footsteps echoing from outside the room caught her attention. She got herself into position. Was it Monoma? Or, the more likely option, was it one of the heroes? She waited anxiously for whoever it was to run into the room. Did she have a plan? No, admittedly. The plan was simply, stop whoever tries to touch the bomb, and that's it. She wished she could have had a better discussion with Monoma beforehand, but he seemed to be in a rush to face down with Midoriya and Yanagi? Was that her name? She never really got it down, not with Monoma demeaning Midoriya like that. Those thoughts vanished from her mind as the footsteps drew nearer. Soon, The one who burst into the room was none other than the ghostly girl from earlier. She wanted to ask if Yanagi was truly her name, but she didn't think that was very villain-like. "Stop right there, hero. Move any closer and I'll, strike you down." "Great acting, Ochako. Really great." But then she notices Yanagi's hands. She had Midoriya's gloves on. "I need to get by," Yanagi said, throwing a bunch of little things into the air. Upon closer inspection, they were pieces of glass, and quite sharp as well. The objects started suspending in midair and quickly darted towards her, causing Ochako to immediately dive behind a pillar for cover. Whatever Yanagi's quirk was, it was a terrible matchup for hers. She attempted to peek around the corner, seeing Yanagi attempt to approach the bomb. Ochako took a deep breath. "No, you don't." She threw caution to the wind and put a hand on herself, which then she made yet another dive, this time towards the air. Activating her zero gravity, she got herself into the air, gaining a good amount of height, before deactivating it soon after. Using what little time she had in the air, she got into a position to apprehend Yanagi. One shard alone might not have done much damage to her suit, but several upon several pieces like that cut through parts of her suit like butter, even getting a few cuts on her. Yanagi tried to dodge, but Ochako grabbed her arm, then activated zero gravity before throwing her into the air and away from the bomb. Ochako smiled mischievously, before gasping in shock as she was pressed by another round of glass shards. She supposed even while in the air, Yanagi wouldn't be distracted that easily. Speaking of whom, she pressed her feet against the wall and sprang towards Ochako. "Release!" Yanagi yelped as gravity suddenly returned, causing her to fall hard to the ground. Quickly grabbing her ancient hifus, Ochako rushed in attempt to apprehend her once more, but the gray-haired girl swept her legs out from under her. She watched her run toward the bomb, then quickly got up, dashing and throwing a punch. Yanagi blocked it with her arm and sent glass shards flying at the brunette. The two separated slightly, their arms up in fighting stances. Ochako, breathing hard, prepared herself. This would take a while. Izumi's arms bulged as she activated Hammer Arm and threw a barrage of punches. Monoma dodged out of the way before activating another quirk he copied, Big Fist. She watched the giant hand try to crush her, but she quickly responded by shape-shifting her left arm into a spigot and shooting a high-pressure stream of water at him. The boy blocked the water with his massive hand, but it was too much, sending him flying backward once again. Izumi tries to catch her breath before getting hit by a massive fist from Monoma, which sends her crashing into a wall and causes some debris to fall to the ground. "You're really trying, aren't you, Midoriya?" "Huh?" Monoma yelled, slowly moving forward. "You're really getting into the villain role, Monoma-kun?" She staggers up. Although she could still fight, that type of attack was no joke. "But, you're showing your limit." "What?" Monoma looked rather displeased, to put it mildly. His eyes suddenly widened as he saw thin fibers encasing him, circling every part of his body. Izumi then pulls a string, tightening them and holding him firmly in place. "Fiber Master," she yelled. "I have many quirks at my command, all stored in my mind, ready for me to use. But from what I can see, you can only hold about 3 quirks. Not just that, but each has a time limit. You're reaching your limit." "That's not. And thanks to you, you've given me yet another quirk over you," she exclaimed, her right fist growing large, as she throws a massive punch at the trapped Monoma, once again sending him flying. However, she felt her body being lifted and pulled towards the blonde, bracing herself for impact. "Don't talk like you've won. No matter what you say, I'm going to prove myself to you." "Why do you want to prove yourself to me?" Monoma paused, growling as he switches quirks, launching another giant fist at the green-haired girl. However, like paper, her body folded and maneuvered around the attack. That looked mighty familiar to Edgeshot's fold-a-body. Standing a slight distance behind the boy, she reaches her arms out and uses Arbor to wrap him up in wooden tendrils. This test shouldn't be impressing everyone. It should be about improving yourself. You've been challenged me. With a quirk like yours, I have tried to keep distance from you when necessary, since you could touch me. And grab whatever quirk I'm using at a given moment. You really are something, Monoma-kun. Monoma's eyes flicked open, even if only for a brief moment. He paused his struggle, but just briefly, as one of his arms wiggled free and was then pressed against the wood. Suddenly, the wood lunged toward Izumi, who had her body wrapped in the same quirk she just used. That's probably what she got for letting her guard down. Monoma let out a chuckle as his eyes fixated on Izumi. You almost let my guard down with that trick. I'm not tricking you. No need to plead. Shall we wrap this up, hero? Yes, we shall. Suddenly, she appeared to get thinner and slipped out of Monoma's grasp. As he looked for her location, he finally saw her forming in front of him. However, she wasn't moving to attack, she just stood there, her eyes entirely fixed on him. I meant what I said. Your quirk is really cool. Similar to mine, but with a lot more drawbacks. But I think it could be utilized well. After this, let's work on it together. Because right now, I need to turn you in. Think of it as a bit of rehabilitation, she said, offering an awkward smile. She wasn't used to banter like that. The boy once again looked a little stunned. He shook his head, trying to shake it off with another cocky smirk. But she could feel that there was a bit more sincerity this time. The two stood still for a moment longer before Izumi felt another tug on her body. This time, she was prepared and placed her hands on herself, allowing her to be pulled toward Monoma. As she watched Poltergeist deactivate by his hand, she flew past him with lack of gravity, using Arbor to grab debris and fling them upward toward her, while activating zero gravity on them. Monoma caught on to what she was doing, watching him kick each piece of debris at him. He used Poltergeist in an attempt to hold them in place but was knocked back by a surprise stream of water from Izumi. He slid across the ground as he threw a piece of debris back at her, which she smashed away using hardening. In a last-ditch effort, he activated Big Fist and tried to land a possible finishing blow on her, which he did. But it wasn't quite enough, as he felt his timer on Big Fist run out, and Izumi charged inward, landing a small, sparkling explosion on him. There was silence as Monoma stumbled. He raised his hand as if to attack, but lowered it. Izumi grabbed his arms and placed her pair of HNDCFFS over his wrists. And not long after, both villains have been apprehended. The winner of the trial is Team A, Izumi Midoriya and Reiko Yanagi. All Might announced over the intercom. Well, looks like I'm just a side character. I don't see it that way. You did well, Monoma-kun. I still lost. We're all learning, she told him. Don't let it drag you down. Monoma pondered her words. Well, Midoriya, I can't say you were bad either. But still not great. Izumi giggled. I have a lot to learn too. With that, there was a brief silence, but Nido Monoma still offered a small, genuine smile. He was the first to admit that he underestimated Izumi Midoriya. But he'd get better for next time Class 1A and Class 1B were forced to face each other again. But he did learn something new. She might be main character material. But you never heard that from him.